so empty. The only thing I can see is my own silhouette. I'm getting stronger, step by step. The clock is ticking, but there's no time for me. I've been flying from town to town, from London to Taiwan. I've been all around the globe, trying to protect your soul. We are heroes tonight. We will fly above the sky. We are heroes tonight. Yeah. We are heroes tonight. We will fly above the sky. We are heroes tonight. Feel like a dynamite, ready to explode right up in the sky. I need you to listen, I need you to hear, and don't show any fear. I've been flying from town to town, from London to Taiwan. I've been all around the globe, trying to protect your soul. We are heroes tonight. We will fly above the sky. We are heroes tonight. Yeah. We are heroes tonight. We will fly above the sky. We are heroes tonight. Town to town, from London to Taiwan. I've been all around the globe, trying to protect your soul.
Good evening, everyone. Whew, that was quite a weekend, weren't it? This is the World of Football podcast. We are back for another Monday evening after quite the weekend, shall we say. Welcome to any new faces. Welcome back to any familiar faces. Tonight, I am hosting as punishment, apparently, according to the lovely gentleman below me. But I think the weekend was punishment enough for him. So joining me tonight, two titans of this podcast, aside from the other two that aren't here this evening, who are usually on. I'll first come to Mr. Weekly Steel Chair, Mr. Devil's Rising himself. Reese, sum up, how was your Sunday?
Sunday specifically? Sunday? Not the best of them. Not the best.
Wasn't a lazy Sunday, was it?
No, I wish it was. I damn well wish it was. It wasn't the best for multiple reasons, but there's a lot to get through to prove a point.
No worries. Well, we'll come to you very shortly, I do promise you. Joining us both this evening is a gentleman who I've not been on probably nearly enough, actually, in the YouTube space. George, Good evening, my friend. How are you?
Yep, very good. Obviously recovered slightly from yesterday. Not quite as diabolical as it was for Reese, but pretty bad in terms of it as an emotional roller coaster. Obviously the big match the weekend, which we'll get into very shortly. But yeah, obviously recovered, and now we've got an international break to look forward to. Some time for the team, hopefully, to regroup, recuperate. A few issues to iron out, both on the pitch and obviously off the pitch, as I'm sure we'll delve into. And yeah, it's obviously roll on a couple of weeks' time, and specifically as a Man United fan, things definitely don't stop. Obviously Brighton and Bayern as the next couple of matches. So yeah, lots of work to do. But yeah, excited to get into it. And thank you very much, obviously, to Helle and Yeti Boy for joining us as always, as well as obviously everyone else in the chat that's watching. So thank you.
Second that.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of stole my thunder. I was going to welcome them all in as well. Yeah, listen, I hope you're all having a very good evening this evening, especially, I mean, all things considered. Yeah. I think, is that comment of the evening already?
I think there'll be a few to come.
Yeah. I mean, I'm loving the football shirt thing we've got going on here, Reese. Just want to know, are you repping anyone on the back of your shirt this evening? Or just...
I am actually, funnily enough.
Oh, right.
I'm actually...
Kimmich.
I only represent world class.
Fair enough. I also represent world class. I'm currently wearing the Real Madrid strip of 2016-17 with, as Reese knows, my favorite all-time striker, Alvaro Morata.
So he says he's repping world class, but he's fucking repping Morata. That's when we know it's not. That's when we know we're in trouble.
You know full well I'll die on the hill.
I've got no issue against Morata. To be fair, Morata is actually an example of the litmus test if you want football to go well, but time cuts you short in the worst ways. Morata's like that. When he's had good moments, it's always been at the right time. And when he really needs a pick-me-up, it's always been at the wrong time. And he doesn't recover well from it. It's a shame because I actually think Morata's a decent player, actually. And he's been beneficial for a lot of clubs like Real Madrid numerous times, big for Atletico when they called upon him. Crucial for Juventus, knocking out Real Madrid, funnily enough, in the Champions League 8 years ago this year. He has that in him. The only thing is, though, is I think something that he's made a mistake of is career choice of where he goes. I think the one thing he made the mistake of was the Premier League, and it didn't help that the club he went to was not the best place for him. He got the wrong Premier League club, to be honest.
I'm in 100% agreement with that, but I think there might be a chance we come to that later. Who knows? See how the night goes. But it's funny you mentioned the litmus test of football going well and it doesn't and all that, because as far as Sundays go, Reese, it wasn't a good day for you, was it?
This is going to be the theme of the show. Miserable at which point? Yeah, true. It wasn't the best. It wasn't the best. But
why don't you give us your thoughts? Firstly, we'll come to the big Super Sunday game of the weekend. That is United. I'll come to you first, Reese. What were your thoughts about the game in general? Because at some point it looked like it was going to end for a draw. Then it looked like Garnacho had stolen it in Ronaldo's T90 boots from 2009, and then suddenly a gap opens and Rice scores, and then suddenly Arsenal have won 3-1. So what were your thoughts about the game, the refereeing, and how it went?
I didn't expect us to win against Arsenal at the weekend, personally. I had to say I've been quite consistent the past couple of weeks on the show where I said, doesn't matter like how well we can try to play, we are not playing well. And the games we were really poor in, we've actually played good teams as a follow-up, and we've actually got a hiding from it. So like when we played Wolves, we were very lucky to beat them. And my exact words were, if we play that again against a team that are actually on a similar level or better than us, we will get hiding. Coincidence, we got fucked by Tottenham. Like, we didn't even just get beat by Tottenham. We got statistically and physically fucked by Tottenham. And it was only 2-0. It should have been 5, 6, 7 to Tottenham, in my opinion. Like, that's how bad we were. We got the result, I agree. We got the result against Nottingham Forest. Again, Nottingham Forest were the better team. Nottingham Forest were the better team against us as well in that game as well. The only difference is, though, is the second half. Nottingham Forest, I don't know what went on in their heads, but they completely changed. If Nottingham Forest had actually came at us in the second half and not defended, if they just attacked us left, right, and centre, there's no way we're winning that game as well. There's United right now, there's so many deep-rooted issues, and yet people think we're playing well. I've seen so many people saying we're playing well, and I'm like, where is the evidence we're playing well? I'll take a defeat if we're playing really poor, because at times you need to get those bad results into wins, like bad performances into a result. I'll take it. But if we are going to be playing this bad for a length of period of time, then the worst thing is, though, is you can't even put the blame on me and George have been on this podcast for so long that if it's not the manager's fault, it's the player's fault. If it's not the player's fault, it's the manager's fault. If it's not the manager's fault, it's the player's fault. But yet, I honestly cannot pick out the actual problem at United anymore regarding the whole fucking club. Like, forget the ownership, right? The ownership is a different situation, and people use that as an excuse every time we lose. The owners are the reason we suck regardless, but you cannot blame the owners when United get fucked 3-1 in the last 5 minutes against Arsenal. You can't use the owners for that. But you can use the owners for poor facilities and having people in charge that don't know what they're doing. So you can blame the Glazers for that. And I will completely agree on that till the end of my time when eventually they disappear, and hopefully very soon. But in terms of the manager, like his substitutions, his tactics, his personnel that he's choosing to play, it's not going to do him any favours when it gets to January. And there was people that were saying 10-game Hagen and he'll be gone. Obviously, I'm glad he's still here, but this is his second season. There is some good players in this squad. He should be able to clearly identify who those good players are. But the ones that are going to keep holding him back are the same players we've spoken about in this podcast for 3-4 years. One of them's already gone in terms of the goalkeeping situation. One of them's moved on. So you cannot use David De Gea as an excuse anymore. Like, no one can use David De Gea as an excuse anymore. That includes George. He's gone. So he's out the way. Maguire's still here. Again, that's an issue with the club. And also himself, because he wanted big money to go, which he didn't deserve in the first place. The midfield is still looking shaky. Despite the fact that we've spent on it, it doesn't look like it's been spent on. And that concerns me, because the midfield was my biggest thing for the summer. I was like, I want this midfield invested in. Forget defence, forget attack. That will come at some point. I want the midfield to look competitive in the sense that we can go to a City. We're going to get battered anyway. But I want us at least to go to a City, go to a Liverpool, go to an Arsenal, go to Chelsea and be like, you know what? We may not have a midfield that can physically beat you pound for pound or technical-wise, but at least we've actually invested in the midfield to make it look convincing. The personnel we've got in the midfield, only, 2 of them, maybe 3, are generally saying that you can arguably predict United's midfield when it comes back to international break, and that's Amrabat, Onana. Sorry, I would say Onana, to be honest, as a midfielder. But Amrabat, Casemiro, and either Fernandes or Mount. But I'm still picking Eriksen over one of them. Amrabat's my defensive midfielder. And I'm putting Casemiro in a box-to-box role, because at anything, he's not doing a defensive position role that you actually want. He wants to play further forward. I've got no problem with that. He's got a hell of a shot on him. But I look at our entire team, and we are where we are, and it's the fact that it's 4 games in, I still haven't got a clue where we're going to be after 10 games. But when you look at it, it will not be near top 3. And I'm genuinely disappointed because I was hoping that we would get a good result against Arsenal. We done it last year. We started really poorly. We got to Liverpool in the Arsenal games. It changed a little bit. Now, it's any time that we're on the field, it looks like we're going to get turned over. Even if it's 1-0, 2-0, 2-1, like even if we score, it looks like we're getting turned over because the players' aptitude, their attitude, their body language, their fitness, it's nowhere near a performance worthy of Man United. I've seen better performances from 18-year-olds at United that have just come into the team and actually look like they give a fuck compared to most of the guys that played against Arsenal. The first 30 minutes was good. After that, we got exactly what we deserved. We got what we deserved. I don't even know what's happening next. And I hate the fact that people are going to blame one person. They're just going to blame the manager. It's not all on the manager. But there are some things the manager has to change. One of them is that system. We are not good enough to play in a 4-3-3. The way that's set up, it doesn't work. And you cannot keep sacrificing attacking midfielders to play as a number 8 role when generally they want to stay in an attacking position anyway because their first priority is, I want to fucking score. We need to have that organised system. I think Ten Hag is trying too much to make it look like a team system, and it's not working. And I pray for him. I pray for him more than anything else because it's the same thing at United over and over. You get Champions League, spend big. Following season, we see how it goes. But the worst thing is now is Ten Hag has spent £242 million on defenders, and it looks like we've spent £242 million on smuggling cocaine in some third world country. Like, that's how bad we look defensively. It looks easy to get through. I'm terrified, honestly. Don't know what George is going to say, but the fact that we played Brighton next, who actually had despite the result against West Ham last week, they've had a very good start to the season. All round, they're carrying on. They can lose players, but the system, the style doesn't change. That's the worst thing about coming against a team with a manager that actually has a set style, regardless of personnel. We don't have that. It seems like you've got to have personnel to make the system work. That's not how this team should be working for me. And that worries me. Forget Bayern. I couldn't give a fuck about Bayern because that's different. But it's the fact is, like, no matter who plays in that Brighton team, they're going to play the same way. And we do not look prepared.
No, we don't. I mean, I agree with everything you said there. And I think the one thing, what you said about the midfield there, for me, it resonates with Mourinho's final game. When you're talking about a midfield that's not the best, but that will try. Mourinho's final game against Liverpool, December 2018, by the way. So this is 4.5 years ago, almost 5 years ago. He played a midfield of, I think it was Matic, Herrera, and Fellaini.
Yep.
None of them are going to win you the game. That was Mourinho, and that whole lineup, I think, was solely of Mourinho using all the players that he thinks, I can count on him. I can count on him. I don't care if he's terrible. I can count on him. He had a back four of Young, Lindelof, Bailly, and Darmian that day, and Lukaku, Lingard, and I think Rashford up front as well. The point is what you said there, though. This has been going on for years, and it's not changing. I think the only element you can make against the Glazers because it was a poor performance of the weekend. I think if we got away with a draw, I think it would have been a good result. If Garnacho's goal, which the offside, I'm still not sure about because one angle looks like he's off, the next one looks like he's on. I don't know, but from what we're seeing the same thing go on. And with the Glazers, I think the fact that we finished the game with Maguire and Evans, our fourth and fifth choice centre-halves. Johnny Evans wasn't supposed to, with all due respect to him, he wasn't supposed to play these big games, was he? I know, obviously, maybe you could argue there might be problems with injuries or whatever, but the fact of the matter is, it's been so poor from United this season. And I said last week that it's been a multitude of a few things. And I think it could be that a multitude of everything takes its toll and has all come together. George, I know you want to be vocal about yesterday. Go on, mate.
Yeah. I actually think it was quite an even match between the two sides. I think what was good for us was, and I'll just sort of this was obviously a stat that sort of came out today, and that obviously didn't surprise me either. It said against Arsenal, Andre Onana made 42 successful passes across his entire 415 game Premier League career. The most number of successful passes David ever made in one game was 39. So for me, it was all about. I actually thought Anand did a great job in terms of like passing the ball out. Obviously, it all sort of went pear shaped. Obviously, when Martinez went off and we started playing the ball long, because of course Maguire and then obviously Evans can't actually play, the modern style of football. But for the majority of the match, actually, things were relatively contained. Arsenal obviously didn't press us too high up the field, and of course the reason they didn't press us too far up the field wasn't just because of the extreme heat, but also because Onana can play out through it. And obviously we saw that again with other teams as well. When they know a goalkeeper can actually play out through it, you don't press him because that's what they want. So you just stand off. And so we had a lot of sort of quite comfortable possession in our sort of like final, in obviously Arsenal's final third, obviously, but our initial third. What the issue for me, obviously I'm going to go into a few of the issues, but another issue that I feel that we have is the fact that Bruno Fernandes often plays too high up. I think we should be playing with almost like 2 8s. So 2 players who are trying to receive the ball and obviously try and progress it. A lot of the time, Eriksen was all sort of only out, and Bruno sort of like standing up the field doing nothing. There wasn't enough of an out ball. Players don't move enough for whoever's on the ball either. I've often said that about Bruno as well, that his positional sense isn't the best. And of course, but we all know that he's, as De Bruyne sort of said, a chance machine or a creative machine. But obviously, the rest of his game with Bruno, is sometimes lacking. And for me, that was sort of like where it all went wrong. We had a lot of, as I said, comfortable possession with Lindelof, Martinez, and then Wan-Bissaka and Dalot, but actually progressing it through that midfield was a lot more difficult. And as I said, Bruno, I feel was majorly integral to the reason we couldn't move it, because like I said, he oftentimes he's just sort of standing up, not offering the extra pass. A lot of the time, I was thinking obviously with Casemiro, obviously at Real Madrid, he would have had Kroos and Modric, who obviously are players who are all time great players. But also players who are consistently sort of offering in the spaces and consistently drop deep to actually orchestrate things. And obviously for Casemiro, it must be, a real sort of eye opener when he looks up the field and sees Bruno hovering around the striking position with all the time, rather than offering that outlet. And so we then often had to play that sort of Hollywood ball, whether it was Casemiro or Eriksen trying to play that long ball either to Antony or Rashford. A lot of the ball was obviously coincidentally, because I know a lot of people sort of going in on Onana for losing the ball, but a lot of his sort of long balls he was sort of attempting to Rashford. As we saw on that third goal, when Rashford sort of jumped and then never made actually any intervention when Arsenal broke away. We've seen that too many times with Rashford, and obviously Pep Guardiola talked about it as well just before the final he played against Inter Milan, about the fact that Rashford isn't like Lukaku, he won't compete for those balls and won't actually make himself known. That's exactly what you saw. Obviously those arrowed balls actually for Rashford weren't too bad. It's just that Rashford never goes for it. There was even one that sort of actually hit his head and sort of went away. So Rashford as well really disappointed me. Obviously, I'm going to go in on quite a few of the players, but Rashford really disappointed me. We've seen far too often that he runs into blind alleys. There were quite a few counter-attacking opportunities in that second half where it went to Rashford, and then he made poor decisions, didn't pass it, didn't let go of it, sort of ran towards the side rather than direct, and really did have some poor decisions. In terms of where it's all gone wrong, one of the key attributes, as we know, or aspects, has been FFP. we've now been screwed over it this summer because finally, sort of a decade's worth at least of piss poor financial decisions, paying for massive fees for crap players who've never made it, and obviously letting go of often the same crap players, but other players as well for small fees, has now finally come home to roost. I'm unsure as to whose decision it was to get Mason Mount. Josh will know this obviously as well because I've spoken about it so often, but I've never really rated Mount. Obviously,
that was definitely Ten Hag. That was definitely Ten Hag. All those signings are him. I'm 100% sure of that, because every single one of them comes out saying he's got a link to Ten Hag. It's definitely him.
I'm not quite sure why we went for him first. I'm not quite sure why we got him in a way, but never mind. Obviously, Hoyland had a good cameo, but I think Johnny Evans, when we sort of made that, when he first started training, I was like, I sort of predicted in kind of a slightly mocking way, but at the same time, I thought it was going to transpire in a way that we were going to sign him permanently. Any club who's got any sort of serious designs on winning major silverware would never sign Johnny Evans. Sort of Gandalf's dad, using this as a retirement home, absolute disgrace, giving him a contract. And in many ways, it's not his fault actually coming on. It's the fault of the club, because they should never have signed him. There must have been other deals that they could have done. I don't care, that he's the fact that he's played for the club before, or that he's, as far as I know, he's a model professional. Unfortunately, when you get to that age, you shouldn't be playing for Manchester United, especially when you were never sort of world class. It'd be fair enough. Let's say I don't even think Ramos. Obviously, he's now gone back to Sevilla, but I don't even think Ramos would do that well.
There was a report from the Sun, so take that with a pinch of salt. But apparently, it was released today, ahead of his move to Sevilla, that apparently United approached him and he rejected them instantly. I kind of find that hard. I don't blame him, but I also kind of find it hard to believe that.
Why should he? Why should he? Why the fuck would Sergio Ramos and
Casemiro just saying, "Listen, mate, forget what the news is telling you. We got it good here.
No,
I promise you now."
He just had to turn on the TV and he'd know that he didn't have it good.
Ramos is like, why the fuck would I want to go to somewhere that's to quote a circus? Why the fuck would Sergio Ramos want to go to a circus when he's going to walk into a club that's going to deliberately finish third in their Champions League group so they can just pump through the Europa League and win that again? Like, Sergio Ramos this time next year will have won the Europa League again with Sevilla. Like, there's generally no reason for he ain't going to do a Thiago Silva in the Premier League. He ain't going to have that sort of effect. The way he plays football and how it worked in the Premier League, he'd be out within 2 games. He'd be out, whether it be suspension for taking somebody out because his tackling is very brutal, or he'd be exposed by lack of pace. Ramos would be buggered in the Prem. He would be buggered. If this had been 5-6 years ago, completely fine. But right now, nah, he'd be fucked.
I think the final sort of thing I'm going to say is about the manager. There's obviously plenty of other things, but I'm conscious of time. Before the match, obviously, I actually predicted a 3-1 Arsenal win, and I'm quite happy about that in a certain sense, because obviously it gives me a few points. I've obviously got a prediction league elsewhere that's given me a few points for, but I don't think
must be nice.
I don't think it was exactly Mystic Meg to predict that, because we have got a terrible record at the Emirates, going back many years now. In fact, I think it was 2014 the last time we won, apart from obviously
Arteta has never lost a game against Man United whilst he's been manager at the Emirates. He's never lost a game.
Well, yeah, it's obviously for Arteta, I'd be more concerned about his record against Man City, because it's an easy 6 points for Pep, and it has been for years. Incredible, really. I think it's like 12 games on the spin that Man City have beaten Arsenal in the league, obviously. And obviously our league record, like I said, at the Emirates has been crap. The only time that we obviously won there over the last, as I said, 9 years was when De Gea made those 14 saves in that famous match. But anyway, like I said, going back to Erik ten Hag, the final thing is that before the match, I actually said this when we got Varane injured, that the centre back we need to bring in is Eric Bailly. And the reason I've said that is because unfortunately, obviously, maybe a lot of football purists will be talking about the fact that pace isn't necessarily an important aspect of the game, but that's a complete myth. Unfortunately, football is it's an athletic sport, and pace is an important characteristic, and it always will be. And we saw an Arsenal match. As I said, I wanted Eric Bailly to play, Eric Bailly to start, and he was who I'd have put in for the with Varane injured. We saw Lindelof obviously with his booking. He knew that he wasn't obviously Nketiah was round him, and he had to make the hack. Martinez then makes another disgusting hack because again he's being rounded and he knows he can't get it back, and obviously he gets the yellow card and then goes off. You've got to play pace. I have no idea why he hasn't realised that, and of course it's cost us 3 points there. It's just mind-boggling to me that, and like I said when we sort of signed Evans, that everyone associated with that deal should be fired from the club immediately. And
funny thing is, though, is Eric Bailly was on my mind as well.
Matt Hargreaves obviously is now our new director of football negotiations, so he's now the new biggest clown in the circus. It's just absolutely incredible to me, and obviously in terms of the refereeing decisions, the offside I think that debate will rage on. It's slightly irrelevant in the sense that I don't think VAR is foolproof at the moment, regardless of what I know there's a lot of them that's trying to say that it is, but I don't think it is at the moment. I think it will take a few years for them to properly iron it out, that aspect. On the second goal, for me, I think that's expert gamesmanship by Arsenal. I think it is cheating. Obviously Evans is being restricted, and then what's funny is he as soon as he realizes Rice is about to shoot, that's when he sort of like dives over to make it look as though it's a 50-50. So that, as I said, that's brilliant gamesmanship by Arsenal. And then the third goal, I've got to sort of give Evans a bit of some apologies, because I actually thought it was him that was covering for against Gabriel, but of course it was Dalot. If that's Aaron Wan-Bissaka, they don't score that. But because it's Dalot, and obviously defensively, as we know, he was good for a lot of the game, but as we know, defensively he's not the best. That was why Jesus was able to score that, because any other defender would have stayed in his feet, because he actually got so far ahead of him, he'd have stayed in his feet and actually made the block. But because it's Dalot, it's 3-1 and that's game over. But actually, I don't think it's all too doom and gloom. It is, because Eric Ten Hag refuses to play Eric Bailly. But that'll just keep happening. That sort of stuff against any team that's got any pace. That sort of stuff will keep happening.
There's a lot.
Yeah, it's Højlund's obviously a bright spark, but I think defensively that the issue is the pace. Martinez looked like one of the best centre backs in the league last season because he was playing alongside Rafael Varane. I've always said, and I've noticed this. I noticed this last season, that Martinez's big weakness is pace, playing against pace. We saw him obviously against Dan James as well. He made this horrendous hack on him when we played against him last season. And you have to have pace alongside him. And unfortunately, if the rumours are true again, I've seen that we're trying to get rid of Bailly, obviously to Saudi Arabia, wherever it is. That's just terrible management, because you've got to realise that Evans and Maguire are not good enough, and you've got to have pace.
Yeah, I agree on that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the bottom line is there's still a lot wrong with the club. Do you know what I mean? I mean, you could also make the debate even against the playing of Bailly, because it's almost like, hang on a minute. We've seen this time and time again, but players don't have futures, and because they stick around, they end up getting a second chance and prolonging their stay. But the fact of the matter is, the club is in a mess right now, and the reason the video is titled Circus, because it's just a cavalcade of fuck-ups at the moment. It's just terrible. It's just.
I mean, just look at the thumbnail I designed. Right in between the Old Firm and the Man United badge is a man looking at chaos theory.
Yeah,
because that's what it is. United are literally the new development of chaos theory.
We're literally lost at the moment. Briefly, before we move on to the other part of Reese's Miserable Sunday, I did want to ask you both about your opinion on just briefly about the Jadon Sancho incident, because what I'm seeing Ten Hag come out in a press conference and say he's not performing and training at the level. And then I'm seeing media outlets discuss his attitude. Jadon Sancho put out a statement on Instagram, which I'm pretty sure will have angered the members of staff at Manchester United. But I feel like Twitter has blown out of proportion because it's almost like they're seeing two things and they're thinking they're directly linked. But I don't actually think it's directly linked to what Ten Hag has said, because I'm seeing lots of other United fan channels, I won't name them, lots of other media outlets like Sam Luckhurst, for example, a journalist, mentioning attitude. But that's not what Ten Hag has said. And by reading Sancho's words, it looks like he's trying to talk about don't read into everything that puts out there because it's not true, in terms of I don't have a shit attitude. So he's almost like rubbishing those claims. So I just wanted to ask your opinion on. I'll come to you first, Georgia, but just briefly, what is your whole stance on this Sancho thing?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you in the sense that I think it's been blown out of proportion. What the media love to do, because obviously with Manchester United being the biggest club, is they love to cover us in great detail because they know that obviously they want the clicks and they want the revenue from that. But also it's because it helps create division and it helps create this idea again of unrest, and it's helping to unsettle anything that Eric Ten Hag is trying to build. So I think that tends to be what happens. And also, obviously, even after, like I said, on another day, that could have been us. Obviously, if Garnacho is onside, that could have been us walking away with a win. And then, of course, none of these stories or issues come to light. It's obviously an unlucky situation. Even on that, like I said, on the second goal with that shoving incident with Evans, and obviously a third goal is just a bit of a piss take because of course we committed everyone up top because of the second goal. In regards to Jadon Sancho, I think it's a bit of a last chance saloon for him. It's crazy, really, to me, just on Sancho as one example of it, of how much money we've actually spent on the attack. If we actually add up all the money we spent on this attack over the years, and the fact that it is so goal shy is quite incredible. And obviously Sancho is just one example of that. A lot of people I know are sort of trying to agitate for him to sell him to Saudi Arabia. I think it's up to Ten Hag and the club really what they want to do. There is also, actually, to be fair, just talking about the Sancho rumours, there was also a story that came out about how members of his camp are quite upset about how Anthony continues to get, it's almost regardless of form, how Anthony keeps getting picked and obviously keeps being trusted by Eric Ten Hag, which I think it's quite a calculated story, that, because ultimately there's some degree of truth to that, in my opinion, in a way, because it seems, obviously I've often called Anthony Eric Ten Hag's Brazilian stepson, because no matter what happens, it tends to get picked, regardless of poor form or inability in front of goal in terms of creation or goals themselves. So yeah, Sancho's just obviously got to work on himself, and it's a bit of an upsetting thing, really, because a bit like Dele Alli, there's obviously an English player there who almost sort of had the world at his feet as a late teens, early 20s. And then he's sort of fallen off, and he obviously should be using Dele Alli as a bit of a story of warning, in a sense, that obviously very quickly, obviously we all know what the horrendous things that happened to Dele Alli anyway, but obviously in terms of like a footballing career, things can obviously dissipate very, very quickly, and for Sancho, obviously still a young man, but he doesn't want the years to sort of go by wasting at Manchester United if that's not the path for him. And we probably do need some investment, up top anyway, because I think apart from, I think even Rashford, who many people consider our best sort of outlet attacking wise, I think there's, like I said, the blind alley thing previously, there's massive question marks on him. And yeah, it's crazy that after, obviously Reece mentioned it, how much Eric Ten Hag's already spent. It's crazy after that amount how little it's really impacted in terms of what I would call genuine quality. We're sort of almost like a sort of smaller version, in a sense, because obviously Chelsea have spent so much more than us. Smaller version of Chelsea, because again, obviously they've spent over $1 billion and really have no sort of world-class quality show for it. And there's a real similar sort of thread to us as well. and Sancho is a part of that.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, I think it's crazy how we waited a year almost to sign almost what looked like a generational talent called Jadon Sancho, and we ended up with some Puerto Rican fraud called Jason Sanchez. I don't know how that happened, but all jokes aside, it is sad to see what's happening. I think in regard to the Anthony thing, I think it just seems like if Anthony's not having a good game, I think the least is he'll show a bit of fight, whereas I don't think we get that from Sancho as much, at least from what I've seen. I think we're in a position now where in the last year we've somehow ended up with 4 right wingers, 2 of which could displace the 2 big signings in terms of Amad Diallo and Facundo Pellistri. I think once Diallo comes back from his injury, because I think he was due to go out on loan anyway, we could see that happen. So I think you could argue Sancho is that type of player that needs a run of games to get going. The problem is Ten Hag wouldn't come out with a statement like that if Sancho was pulling up trees, whether it be in training or on the field. Like, when has Sancho had a consistent 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 week run of games and he's just pulled up trees like we've seen at Dortmund? We haven't seen that. We've seen little signs, but it's almost like here at United, he seems too scared to take players on. Annoyingly, my Twitter feed is full of like Sancho at Dortmund clips, and it's just a bit like, I love this, but I'm not seeing this right now, and it's upsetting. So, I mean, Reece, do you have any differing opinion at all, or are you kind of in the same boat as me and George with it?
I'm a little 50-50 because Sancho's had problems before at Dortmund. He was fined money for not behaving. He was fined for not coming into training with the proper attitude, coming in late. He said himself in Man United on numerous occasions he's actually come to training late, which it doesn't reflect well on him. Now, that could be for personal issues or not, but regardless, if you're coming in late, that does go against you. That will knock you from the pecking order. It will displace you from where you want to be. I also think as well, as you look at how we want to play football, Sancho's a good player, but if you want to play transitional football, you want to play transitional football with pace. Sancho doesn't have pace. He's just an agile player. He's quick with his head and he's very agile, but he's not 10 to 15 yard burst of pace that we actually need. That's why he's never realistically going to start ahead of a Garnacho, or he's never going to start ahead of Marcus Rashford when you think about it on the left, because he might be smarter than them, but he's not going to do a 10, 15, 20 yard burst of pace that's going to lead to an effective goal contribution, although I say that begrudgingly. It doesn't always work when we need it from the left side, but it's the same with the right-hand side. Like, Anthony might not always be consistent, but Anthony's got burst of pace. He will get you on that right-hand side. Ideally, I think we should go back to the old school methods anyway. If you're playing a front three, our left footers aren't even good enough for the right-hand side anyway. I put them on the left-hand side and I put the right footers on the right-hand side. And if you can't play the other side, then to fuck with you, I don't care. But my biggest concern as well is you can have great technical ability, but professionalism is a really important thing, and reputation as well will always hamper you or benefit you in any industry. I think I would like Sancho to work. I don't think Sancho is best for a wing role anyway. I actually think Sancho's better through the middle. My big concern is the way we set up to play is not going to benefit him anyway. The words in the media don't reflect. I don't think it's all a direct attack on the manager, but I find it quite a coincidence that it happened very quickly after the manager spoke in, where they could have waited a day. He could have waited 1 to 2 days, let it all digest. Instead, his team, it's most likely his team. I don't think it's all on him, but they reacted so quickly in the choice of words as well. It wasn't a short post either. That was quite a lengthy post as well when you look at it. that's another thing that can go against you. And it doesn't help as well that fans also love a scapegoat in any circumstance. You're going to get a media scapegoat, whether it be for your professional ability, or you go and choose an interview with Piers Morgan, or you have XYZ on you. Doesn't matter what you do on a football field, that will always catch you out. And I'm looking at Sancho now. He's in a circumstance where if Diallo and Palestra are available for the game against Brighton, they're more than likely to be ahead of him in the pecking order, and it's going to continue. I feel sorry for him. Jadon Sancho does have ability, but I don't think it'll ever translate to the Premier League. I want him to translate it to the Prem, but it doesn't look like it's ever going to work. And I don't know why. It doesn't even matter what team he's in. It's like Van de Beek. Van de Beek isn't a great player, but he has got a level of technical ability. You don't get to the Champions League semi-final in that Ajax team and actually win trophies unless you have no technical ability. So there must be something there. The problem is it's not translating to the Prem. There are some players who have that ability, but they can't translate it. I think Jadon Sancho's another unfortunate example. And it's quite a coincidence as well that Man City cut ties with him before he even stepped foot on the Premier League pitch. They chose not to give him an opportunity. They got rid of him. So I wonder as well what's going on, what happened at City that made them question his ability as well. Because think about it as well, technical ability-wise, I would say he is on the level of Phil Foden. But the difference is professionalism. Phil Foden might have had an issue on holiday a couple of years ago, but when you actually look at him on the field, everything he does on the field in his area, he actually owns that area. Whenever Foden plays, he's generally one of the best players in his position because he's actually dictating how he is supposed to play. When Sancho's playing for us, he isn't dictating his situation. He's not dictating that 15, 20 yards in the final third that he's to occupy. He's either way off or he's way too high. And he's just not translated onto the field. And if you don't have that connection, whether you be a winger or a number 10, you're getting caught out. And I've been there as a winger myself. I know that. And I've played in the middle as well. I know that importance of having that link. I don't see any chemistry in the field he actually has in terms of relationship. When you look at that field, name somebody that Jadon Sancho generally has a relationship with on the field. And I don't mean like, friendship or anything like that. I mean like a physical working relationship on the field. Because he doesn't have one with Luke Shaw. It doesn't look evident when Luke Shaw plays. I barely see it when he plays with Dallo or Wan-Bissaka. He didn't have much of a connection with Martial. There's very little one there with Bruno Fernandes either. I look at him and I'm thinking either Sancho's ostracised or something else is there, and that again will hamper you. You put him in any other team and you're getting the same problems. I wish I could explain why, but I'm looking at it and I see more failure than I see positive from Jadon Sancho. It could just well be that he's not a Premier League player. If he goes back to the Bundesliga, he thrives. He goes to La Liga, he thrives. Put him in this current AC Milan team, he thrives. I don't think he'll cut in the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, it's been very difficult. I think you could make a case that maybe he's one of those footballers where he's very like things go to. He's a very almost how he feels is how he plays. If you get what I mean, everything that's around him in terms of atmosphere, emotion, etc., etc.
That's the worst thing for a footballer is if you're that type of player. If you're that type of player, you will never ever get to the highest of your performance ability that you want it to be. If you're motivated purely by an atmosphere or an emotion, you're genuinely in trouble. This isn't that type of football anymore. You need to have something else to your game. He's a good player, but it ain't good enough to clearly adapt to the Premier League. There's something that's stopping him from adapting to the Premier League. There's something. I don't think it's more than just emotional ability. It could be emotional attachment as well.
I find it very interesting how City had like a Fab 3 with Foden, Brahim Diaz, and Sancho. Sancho's the first to go. Brahim Diaz starts being integrated under Pep, leaves. Looks like the Real Madrid move doesn't work out, goes to AC Milan, does really well there, and now he's almost being integrated back into the Real Madrid team. At least that's what I read would be the plan. And then Foden has stuck throughout, even with the calls to loan him 3-4 years ago. So I think when you look at each player, you can see that two of them look more like students of the game almost in Foden and Brahim Diaz. And then you look at Sancho and you see that he's a bit more of a freestyle footballer, if you go. I mean, you give him all the freedom in the world on the wing. You say, don't worry, keep trying, keep doing your thing. Almost like if he feels loved, and the problem is we see a lot of players like that fall off on the pitch, like we saw it with Dele Alli, and it doesn't look good for their careers. Now, we could talk about this all evening. Do you know what I mean? Like the rise and fall of Jadon Sancho. I think there's many aspects you could look at. Just before we go into the second part of Reese's Sunday, at least from a footballing sense, what do we think about the rest of the Premier League? Like Everton, Sheffield United, just quickly, what do we think about that one? Everton enough to stay up, even with Beto coming in?
No.
You're still worried?
Not good enough. They're generally not good enough. That Beto's a decent striker, but he's not going to chop up trees. Chermiti, I feel sorry for him as well. Good striker that's come from Sporting, but he's not going to be. He's not all the answers.
He's thrust into the deep end, hasn't he?
Yeah, they fucked him over. Yeah, they fucked him over. I don't understand the Jack Harrison signing though. That's the only thing that doesn't make any sense. Like they're trying to sign players, but that one made no sense to me. Like I just look at Everton and I'm thinking there's still too many problems that won't fix in time. I'll be very surprised if they stay up, regardless of Sean Dyche. I'll be very surprised.
Yeah, I mean,
because they're just as bad as the promoted sides. They're just as bad.
The Jack Harrison signing looks like more of a when you're on the dance floor and you go, it's 10-2. Come on, anyone will do it at this point, And with who was going with Iwobi leaving on the final day, which, by the way, the last time he made a transfer, the same manager who signed him for Fulham got sacked from his job 4 months later when he was at Everton. So I find that quite interesting. Anything else of note? Do you guys want to bring up about the Premier League over the weekend?
The league's over already. The league's over after 4 games. The league's
I would agree.
Done. You may as well just give the title to Man City now. It's over.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I was thinking, and I'll tell you as well,
see, apart from Man United, the worst performing team at the top, like the big 6 or the top 7, is Newcastle United. They're the worst. Apart from United, and I'll say this as well, Man City and Tottenham are the best at the 2 from the big sides, currently consistent performance-wise. Man City and Tottenham, Man United, Newcastle United. Arsenal right in the middle, Chelsea are all over the place. Liverpool, hard to fit them, but their midfield, just like ours, doesn't make any sense. If they're buying Gravenberch to play as a defensive midfielder, you can fucking make sure they're not getting Champions League football next year because he's not a defensive midfielder. I've seen a lot of Liverpool fans come out and saying he's a defensive midfielder. Please tell me you actually watch football first.
I will say, if Doug, if you're still watching,
I'd love to know what Doug thinks that, because I've seen a lot of Liverpool fans saying that
I think what they've done is, I think they've made a lot of good midfield recruitment in the 8s, and if they're going with 10s in the 10s. However, they have not replaced the holding midfield role adequately. You can't tell me that going into a season hoping to bounce back with no disrespect to the player, but he's not.
I like Curtis Jones. I like Curtis Jones, but he's not a defensive midfielder.
He's not a 6. What I'm saying, I mean, when you look at Endo, for example, and by Bajcetic, I think you pronounce his name. I butchered that.
Bajcetic. Yeah, I heard about that hella. Yeah, I've seen the statements. Not good. He's fucked. He is absolutely. He is genuinely fucked. That statement.
It's not looking good. This is United or a circus. Bottom line. Chelsea.
There's a translation as well of what Anthony's allegedly done to his woman as well, where he actually beat her that bad that it burst her breast implant while she was pregnant. Like, I've seen all this today. It genuinely does not. If he is guilty of all this, He is gone. And that's another thing. So that's another big thing that United have wasted money on. It's a shame because even though it's not a shame for that. I mean, like, that's another player who actually genuinely has talent that's yet to genuinely show it in the Prem. But he's also fucked himself if he's done all this to his partner. He is genuinely fucked it, especially when she was pregnant. No man hits a woman, let alone a pregnant woman. I'm sorry, but no, like that's just wrong. I don't know what apparently his mum locked him in the house to stop him from going to even greater lengths. Whatever he's done, there'll be no coming back for him. No coming back.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a circus at United at the moment, and it just seems never ending. And I'm just going to move on from United because we could talk all night about the shit show that is Manchester United at the moment. Reece, the Old Firm, not a particularly great game in my opinion.
I had a feeling it'd be one of the worst Old Firm games I ever watched, and it was.
Yeah, well, when it's Michael Beale versus Brendan Rodgers, I don't think we can expect much, if I'm being perfectly honest. I mean, give me your thoughts on what happened. Give me your thoughts on the game.
It might come across as pure bias, but in no shape or form did Celtic deserve to win that game. Like, it was not a game where you can actually say Celtic deserved to win that. And it wasn't even a game that Rangers deserved to win either. Looking at it, both had chances. Rangers had the ball in the back of the net twice. One ruled off for offside. I completely agree with that one, but the second one was definitely not a foul. How you can give that as a foul, I've got no idea. He's run across him and he's kicked his back leg, but Desser's new to the league. It's his first Old Firm. We'll just take his goal off him. We'll take the contribution off him. It really is poor. But another thing as well that's quite alarming for me is he's playing this diamond system against a midfield three that's actually quite composed and relaxed. But when you look at shape, he's playing Dujon Sterling, who's come out the Chelsea Academy, decent young lad, but you threw him into the deep end at left back in one of the biggest games you're going to have in the season, the first major game. So already you've hampered a young lad, when ideally you should be putting a traditional left back like Yilmaz, for example, at left back, where you actually have the balance of a left footer on that side. That whole defence was right footers. There was no balance to at least cut on that left foot if you've got an Abada coming at you on the right-hand side. There was nothing there. The midfield, Callum McGregor had 35 minutes of control in that entire game. Yes, Celtic didn't score, but he was literally pickpocketing pass after pass after pass. Campbell was constantly running around trying to actually... I'll give Todd Campbell credit. He was running around a lot, but he was actually the only creative focal point of the entire team. He was actually trying to create chances. I look at the whole performance in general. Raskin, decent performance, but again, caught out having to play in a narrow system. I don't know why he's playing Ravi Matondo as a striker when Ravi Matondo's a left winger. There's options there. Danilo on the bench. Lammers on the bench, like a big target man. Kemar Roof, decent game from Kemar Roof, but again, like, it's Michael Beale. He didn't do it last year. He's not going to do it for me this year. The man doesn't convince me. A blind man with no tactical nous can do a better job than Michael Beale. He should not be in the job. He should have been sacked yesterday, in my opinion. Even though it finished 1-0, he should have been sacked. Now is an opportunity where Rangers can regroup, but I beg that Michael Beale actually translates this system and changes it. Why he goes back to the using... I don't know why he stopped using players in wide positions, but if you're reduced to playing a diamond midfield because you cannot physically create from the width, then that speaks alarm bells about your coaching. When there was nothing penetrative from the fullbacks or the wingers, Tavernier was in positions where generally he can get into an attacking position to cross the ball in, constantly neutralised because the midfield was too narrow, not giving him a chance to overlap. That's another alarm bell for me. And the minute the ball was ruled out for the goal that was taken off from the foul that was never a foul, at that point, Rangers' pressing improved, but the passing coincidentally did not. The passing went completely average after that. The ball fell into Celtic's lapping. Again, it's a good goal by Kyogo, but it's not a game where either team should be winning. It was a draw written all over it. It was actually really shite start to finish. Horrible game. It's the worst Old Firm game I've ever watched. Between two sides are actually even. Because on paper, they're both shit. And their managers are equally shit. So no surprise that Celtic are going to finish bottom of their Champions League group. And Rangers will struggle in the Europa League. So I say that in the nice way possible. Like, either team generally aren't good enough, but nah, it's really poor. Celtic won, fair play to them, but it was a lucky result for Celtic, in my opinion. They didn't deserve the win.
I think, if I'm being honest, from what I saw of the game, I don't know, George, I'll come to you in a moment about it. I don't know if you're in agreement with me on this, but it looked like a game where on another day, Rangers nick it. It looked like that kind of game where it should be a draw mainly, or one of the teams nick it. It just seemed like that kind of game of fine margins, even with the goal ruled out or not. George, what do you think from what you saw of the game?
I obviously only saw extended highlights, but obviously it did seem like a very even match. In terms of that sort of disallowed goal, obviously the one that Reece is referring to in terms of the foul. Now, for me, obviously, I try to sort of was rewatching that again and again to try and ascertain exactly what happened, but because it was obviously such minimal contact in the first place, but then it also there was one angle that I sort of saw where it looked like obviously the forward had been kicked himself, so it was like, why has that been disallowed? Which is quite incredible, but. Also, what I've got to say is that, and I've seen, because I've watched Rangers in the past as well, over the past few years, and it always seems to me that obviously, it always seems to me that, but it always seems to me that striker wise, there's always some of the chances they missed in that second half, obviously when they were chasing the game, were just absolutely incredible. I just can't believe that
Lammers miss was incredible.
Yeah. It just sort of beggars belief, really. Obviously, Kyogo goal was phenomenal. I actually think there's no chance really for the keeper. I was looking at it, I was thinking, can the keeper save that? And I was thinking, no, he can't, because it's hit with such power and precision that there's just no way they go. You'd have to be. It's very easy, obviously, when the television cameras sort of slow it down, because you think it's you don't think it's traveling that quickly, but obviously in real time that's an absolute rocket, and there's no way he's going to save that. So can't do anything about that. But
30 goals now in 40 SPFL games, and 6 of them I think have come against Rangers.
Yeah,
he owns you.
He doesn't, but he's a genuinely good player. He's the best striker that Celtic have had in this league since Henrik Larsson.
Yeah, that's a shout. Samaras was quite a beast, weren't he?
No, he's not. It's not even a shout. It's not even a shout. He is genuinely better than any striker Celtic have had since Larsson.
Yeah, the obviously the other thing I was going to say just about Rangers was. And obviously, I've only sort of brought this up because I'd only sort of recollected it when Reece was sort of talking about the European football-wise, what Celtic and Rangers will do this season. But yeah, I had sort of obviously PSV Eindhoven are a good side anyway, so it's no disgrace to go out to them. But obviously, the manner of that of what happened in that second leg. That obviously of that specific, obviously we don't need to talk about it, but that specific goal was and that was when they sort of talk about pub football, that's about the same. That's about that sort of standard.
Worst thing is though is the Rangers did exactly what Man United did against Arsenal. They scored good goal, and then
imploded.
immediately PSV went up and equalised. And I was like, that sort of thing that cost Rangers, and there's if that didn't happen, they've got a better chance. They completely, I don't even know what the fuck happened, but they just allowed them to go back to sleep. And again, it's system-wise, it just doesn't work.
I sort of I misread that for a moment there, because all I saw is Kyogo, best Japanese player, and I was like, what? What?
He's the best active Japanese player. He's the best Japanese player since Kazuki Honda. when Honda was at his when Honda was consistently performing, he was fucking unreal. But again, and another thing is, I actually think Kyogo's better than Nakamura was. And Nakamura was a genuinely good talent and a very consistently good player. I think Kyogo's better for them in decisive moments. He can't hit a free kick like him, but he's definitely very more decisive and effective. He runs games himself. And if you've got a striker that can do that, you should do everything in your power to keep him. I'm surprised he's not at Tottenham. I thought he was going to go to Tottenham with Postecoglou, to be honest. But I think he could end up there next.
Still come. Could still come. Richarlison will go Saudi Arabia. I'm just, regarding Spurs, quickly I'll say that I've been vindicated again. I said they would buy wingers and play Son centrally when they sold Kane. And the moment he does that, Son gets a hat-trick. Richarlison will go Saudi Arabia next season, and Kyogo, I think, will go there. Funnily enough, talking about strikers, we will move on now. Now, Reese's favourite striker of all time in Serie A played on Friday and lost to the team Reese supports.
What?
You know who I'm talking about. Big Ron. Part of a Roma team that lost for the weekend.
They did nothing until the 92nd minute when they scored.
But, I mean, listen, I don't know about you, George, but Milan is the team that me and Reese rep in Serie A. Well, I'm sure you knew that about Reese, but I don't know if you knew that about me at all. Now, there has been discussion between myself and Reese, and quite openly, that Serie A might be over already. Now, we don't want to count our chickens before they hatch. Do you know what I mean? But I don't know, Reese. Are you still with that belief at the moment?
To be honest, looking at the league already, only 2 teams in the league have perfect records, and that's Inter and Milan. Both of them have got perfect records. Juventus are 2 points behind, but in third position. Roma are in 18th. Lazio have had a very bad start as well. Napoli, inconsistent. You look at it, and it looks like Napoli are still a strong team, and they've been okay, but they just haven't delivered well. It's generally looking like a 2-horse race for the whole season again. It looks like it's going to be Inter versus Milan again. Inter are definitely going to have the better defensive record, but when you look at the balanced squad, the fact that Milan are the top goal scorers in the league already, genuinely top goal scorers. The only thing is Inter Milan have just got a better goal difference at the moment. When you look at the league, Milan lost Tonali in the summer, which I was really disappointed with. Rebic is gone, so that's another experienced player, although I did say he had to go anyway, but it's still experience. He's now moved on. Balotelli's gone, even though he's not great, but he was at least a backup left back that's there, but he's been replaced by Pellegrino. Milan have literally went out this summer and signed Chukwueze from Villarreal. They brought in Pulisic for Chelsea, who's actually started the season really well.
Who'd have thunk?
You bring in Noah Okafor, who I have raved about for a long time from Salzburg. He's been fantastic.
Yeah, we know.
Olivier Giroud is comfortable with Rafael Leao, who's had a very good start to the season. He's scored goal of the season already. That overhead kick is goal of the season already. Musa has been signed from Valencia. He's comfortable. Reijnders has been signed from Feyenoord. He's comfortable. Benacer's yet to return from injury, and yet he's still going to be a great midfielder for the squad. You've got Theo Hernandez, who's got an extra lease of life. Mike Maignan fully fit. Malik Thiaw has continued to prove why he's a very good centre-back coming through, and he's actually cemented his position. Calabria is solid at right-back. You've got Florenzi as a decent right-back backup as well for rotation for games. So you've got 2 right-backs and 2 left-backs. Tomori, bar the red card, still going to give you some games there with some experience. It genuinely looks like when you look at the season, Milan lost arguably one of the best midfielders in the league. but they've actually had the best transfer window, and they look genuinely better to go. Plus, they've signed Jovic on a 1-year transfer as well. Now, Luka Jovic isn't what he used to be, but he'll still at least add goals to this squad. So he'll be at least able to work with Giroud as a 25-year-old striker at least. Well, obviously with Colombo going out on loan. Milan genuinely look prepared for the season ahead, where they want to compete in the Champions League and Serie A. It will not surprise me if Milan win one of 3 trophies this year. Milan will either win Champions League, Coppa Italia, or Serie A. They will win one of them. And I wouldn't be surprised if they actually go up and do a double. They could win the Coppa Italia as well, because the team genuinely looks that well prepared. And I'll say another thing as well, credit to them, because they've come out and said they're either going to play a 4-3-3 or they're going to play a 4-2-3-1, depending on the opposition. Vast majority of the time, it's going to be a 4-3-3, and it's actually high-pressing teams. When we play against teams like Inter Milan or Inter, we're going to play a 4-2-3-1. We're going to have a number 10 behind to get creative. The team generally looks comfortable in both systems. I'm actually very confident for Milan compared to, say, Inter Milan doing well when they've got one system in a back three, but it's changing the personnel. Milan can change the personnel and the system, and they look prepared for the league. They look prepared for every competition. It's probably the best transfer window Milan have had in recent years, and I'm actually impressed they spent the money on them, so fair play. And it's young, hungry players that want to win. I think Chukwueze is one of the best signings they've made in a long time. I think he was brilliant at Villarreal. He's going to add to this as well, comfortably. Pulisic looks comfortable in the league, even though Pulisic wasn't great at Chelsea last year. He looks comfortable. Another player I forgot to mention as well started really well. Loftus-Cheek has started really well for the league. He's generally started well in that creative role. I look at that whole squad, and as a Milan fan, no, I'm happy. I'm genuinely happy with how we started. Because it's not just that, it's 3 wins on the bounce. And then after the international break, it's Inter Milan versus AC Milan on the Sunday. Derby Day on the Sunday. Already top of the table clash. I'm honestly, I'm genuinely confident for the season.
I think it's been a good summer overall, actually. I mean, I think it's poetic that the San Siro has been, almost reclaimed by football, if you know what I mean. And now it's almost such a monument, it can't be touched. And to see, I mean, it started horribly for Milan. It wasn't so long ago we thought it was going to be a terrible summer for Milan, because we saw Maldini leave and we thought, oh my God, it's over. Pioli's going to take us like further down the league. It's all, everything's not coming up Millhouse, put it that way.
And get rid of Divock Origi is my happiest moment of the summer.
Yeah, I think the players they've let go, and I think especially when you lose Tonali, you worry that is the recruitment going to be adequate enough?
Mm-hmm.
And it has been at the start of the season from both the Milan clubs, especially with Inter, where they're not playing that Belgian fraud anymore up front because he's not there anymore. It's a real statement of intent, and we'll see obviously as the season goes on. But my views echo that of Reese's with what could happen. I mean, I love hearing this from Reese and thinking he doesn't really rate Pioli as much from what he still thinks.
I'm still annoyed with Pioli, but
exactly, you haven't changed that stance, but you can't deny that it's been a statement of intent and it's looking really good at the moment. So, I mean, George, do you want to add anything regarding Serie A? Could literally be anything. Could be on Milan, could be on Lukaku. We do love some Lukaku talk on this channel, you see. So,
well, I was actually going to stick up for Lukaku because obviously, despite the disgraceful, it was a terrible performance, obviously in that Champions League final against Man City. I'll never forget, obviously, that night in Paris. Where he scored those 2 goals, obviously against Paris Saint-Germain, came up really, really, really big. When obviously our backs were against the wall, probably the biggest time our backs have been against the wall in the last few years, in terms of the fact we never thought we'd get that result. And you needed one man, obviously, to really step up. And obviously Lukaku was the one that made sure we were in that game, obviously, until that final minute. And of course, we then got that brilliant VAR decision for the penalty. So And I think Lukaku has been at times during his career. That's why obviously he's commanded all these different fees, these large fees. Obviously, at times during his career, he's obviously been very prolific. He's also been an incredible sort of target man. And obviously against Man City, apart from obviously the final touch, which he should have applied, there were some really good. Obviously, I spoke about it. I sort of alluded to it previously during this stream. Obviously about Rashford not being able to jump, and the fact, and obviously that's why Pep was a bit more concerned against Inter Milan, because he knows that Lukaku will be able to hold it up. And we saw obviously again against Arsenal, obviously with Rasmus Højlund, that he can do that same sort of job, and that's why obviously Erling Haaland, apart from obviously the goals that he provides to Man City, he also provides that important job of being able to actually occupy players, which is something that Lukaku has been superb at his entire career. Obviously, and,
I won't knock Lukaku on that. If you really want to bully a centre back, he will bully you. I will give him that.
But obviously in terms of Serie A, as you sort of spoke about, obviously I know it's. Obviously, the Premier League's quite different, isn't it? Because, of course, we sort of rely on goal difference, in terms of settling things in the end. But, of course, the thing with a lot of the other continental leagues is it's head-to-head. And obviously, as we know, last season, that was why I thought Inter would beat AC Milan, obviously, in the semi-finals. Because, of course, recently, as you guys all know, obviously, as AC Milan fans, Inter have had that sort of dominance, really, in terms of the head-to-heads between the two. So... obviously that could come into play, but I think it is. That's why when I sort of said Serie A, I saw Serie A was there, and I thought I'll just have a quick look at the table. And I was like, 3 games played, and they're already like, what's happened? If they found out about match fixing again, and like 18 teams have been docked about 50 points. But I think it's a bit too early. But obviously, the signs are good, obviously, and I think with the Milan side, they're all sort of like neck and neck anyway in those regards. They're all sort of fighting for things. And I remember obviously a couple of seasons ago, of course, when AC Milan did win the Serie A, obviously Inter were their closest rivals then again. So it'll be interesting to sort of see that battle, coincide again. But yeah, obviously in terms of like Serie A and sort of where my affections or loyalties lie. They possibly should lie with Roma, and the only reason I say that is because when I was a small child, I had obviously an Italian neighbour, and she gave me a Francesco Totti shirt. So this was obviously like many years ago, which obviously turned out quite well. Totti, playing for until he was 41 or whatever it was. So yeah, but obviously, I do enjoy Italian football, and obviously. Again, I'm old enough to remember Football Italia as well when that was on, and that was always exciting, sort of watching the various teams play.
There's nothing like Serie A. I don't know why people knock Serie A. For me, it's the most enjoyable league in football.
I think George should get the new Roma kit with Lukaku on it. That's just my opinion. And look, I think briefly on Lukaku,
your Lukaku dick riding is absolutely shocking.
It's not though, because it's not, because he's let him. I don't know what happened to him. He's declined since his Everton days. I don't care what people say about his goal record, but ever since he got to United, he bulked up too big. He almost what he used to rely on. It wasn't the most technically gifted, but it was almost like any mobility he had, he used. But he had a good mix of pace and power, and he's not as well equipped because he got way bigger than necessary, got overweight, leaned up a little bit at Inter, bagged goals, playing more of a fox in the box role. But because he's still big, he still has that about him where he can bully players, which you can't deny is a very good asset to have. The problem he has is like his Everton days and the first 10 games of United, where I think he scored like 10 goals in 10 games. Like, he's a proper purple patch merchant, because then he didn't score for 2 months. And when he was slim and mobile, he could move though. He was still strong, but he could move. He could dribble at an okay level. But ever since he got too big, it's almost like he still believes he can do all those things, but he almost gets in his own way sometimes. Have you seen that? There's this failed comp of Lukaku at United, first couple of months of his second season, and it's just him. It's got the Benny Hill music on. You guys might have seen it, and like it's honestly ridiculous. He tries to do step overs, he tries to dribble, it just fails badly. And I just think that
You mean
he got so
stompovers?
big, and
The worst
He
Lukaku
just-
moment at Man United in terms of that sort of like fail thing was when he tried to trap the ball, obviously, and it got stuck under him and he fell. That was the worst moment in terms of
but
that.
you see what I
are-
mean?
Yeah,
It's because he got so big. He almost like, and he's still obviously, listen, I'm all for self-belief and stuff, but the way the guy talks about it is like after every L he's taking, he's talking more and more openly about his self-confidence, like he's the franchise player, when sadly he's not. The problem, I mean, it's another United problem. Players are getting too big and losing mobility. Martial, Rashford, Lukaku, even Maguire, Pogba, we've seen these over the years. Now there's talk maybe it's Casemiro. So there's a genuine problem there, funnily enough. And you worry for players going there. You know, he went to Inter, they found he had a digestive issue, sorted it. It's just, you know, I kind of feel
to be
for
honest, I
Lukaku
blame
because he's a
Luke.
quality player.
I blame Luke Shaw for all these Manchester United diet-related issues. I think he's taking too many Man United players to all-you-can-eat buffets. That's why he's often. I don't know if you remember this, but I've referenced this previously. It was either, I think it was pre-season last season, or maybe even the season before. But the players' pre-season meals got leaked, and Luke Shaw had a burger and chips, but then what his side was more chips. So he had 2 lots of chips for his meal.
No.
Everyone
like
else
that.
had,
way,
like,
there's no way
like
that's
that.
real.
There
Someone
is.
said
I'll
come on,
I'll
show
find
it.
it.
It's real. What's the TV line that somebody does where it's like,
Gavin and Stacey
No.
and James Corden.
aye, that's it.
Is it that one where he just orders so much just for
chips,
himself?
Like, I want this, but it's when he's in the pub. That's it.
Yeah.
He's in the pub with Gavin, and they're sitting there, and he's like, "So you get burger and chips,
Yeah.
plus chips." And she goes, "So what do you mean, more and
Yeah.
chips?" He's like, "So the chips that he would have with his burger,
Yeah.
put on my plate. So you're not having two. You're not having my chips. You're having my burger and chips plus chips. So you put what would be on his plate on my plate. So you just need an extra plate of chips.
I really want to imagine the United players going out for dinner. Luke Shaw goes, "So we split in the bill, yeah?" And they all just look at him like, because there's no way they're going to split the bill.
Yeah.
Are we splitting the bill or splitting your bloody weight, mate? Because there's definitely no required.
Before we move on to our final fun segment, Reece, Bundesliga, Leipzig, thoughts so far?
Decent start. Especially against Union Berlin as well. Really good season last year, and obviously what the commentator was eloquently put when they're saying like they can't surprise you in the Bundesliga this year, but they could surprise you in Europe. I agree. They started well. The only thing that's coincided obviously is Bayern started particularly well. I think it's making for it's going to be between those two for the title. I think when you look at it, I mean, I think the advantage is with, even though Bayern have won so many titles in a row, I think even though Bayern have won so many titles in a row, I still think the advantage lies with Leipzig. They ended the season strongly with the Cup and the Super Cup. I think that'll definitely go in their favour towards the season where Leipzig have realised now, we won the Cup for the first time last year. We're now the first club in a long time to defend it. No club has ever won 3 DFB Pokals in a row. I think they're genuinely motivated now to win trophies. I think Bayern are in for a massive shot this year if Leipzig can get a good run together with good results, especially the recruitment. After losing the likes of Szoboszlai, Leimer and Kunku, getting Baumgartner, getting Openda, getting Šeško in, who scored a double last night as well, getting Xavi Simons on loan from PSG, great loan. They generally look up for it. There's a lot of good for Leipzig this year. Dortmund have made some decent signings as well, but Dortmund again are the same thing. They keep letting up stupid results. Losing Füllkrug is a bad one for them. Losing Füllkrug is But that's a big loss. Losing Füllkrug for Dortmund, but not all in all, I'm happy with Leipzig's business, and I think it'll be Bayern or Leipzig to win the league. I'm hoping it's Leipzig.
Quick shout out, Cardiff City bottling a 2-1 lead at the weekend. Nathan, I hope you're here.
Beautiful.
If not, I hope you come back to this. Shout
That was
out
genuinely funny, because it wasn't just them that got beat that day. Swansea got beat as well. So it was a battle of who's going to have the Twitter war.
It's actually a mid-off at the moment in Wales. Quick shout out to Northampton Town as well, who have started the season not in relegation form. George, any other team, any of the leagues you want to touch upon?
I was just going to sort of speak about, and obviously you'd kind of remind me, obviously with your Real Madrid shirt, Jude Bellingham, who has started the season like a man on fire. It's quite incredible, how well he's done. Obviously, the scoring all these goals, the assists.
I knew you'd say that one.
So dominating proceedings for Real Madrid, and it just goes to show that sometimes you can actually pay those big fees, and it does work out. Obviously, he's, La Liga Player of the Month, and it's really sort of like at such a young age. Again, obviously for Real Madrid, he's dominating things, and it's just absolutely incredible, really, what he's been able to achieve so far for Real Madrid. I knew he'd be a success, but I didn't think it would be this good for Jude Bellingham. So yeah, phenomenal start, and more than likely he'll sort of continue to do that as time goes on.
I think it's his role, because I think it's to do with his role, because I think he's playing at the head of a diamond with Vinicius and Rodrigo playing ahead of him. So it almost becomes, I think, they go to the wing and he becomes almost a false nine. So, I mean, I don't think Ancelotti's happy with all the business. I mean, Jude Bellingham you can't complain with, but I think Joselu, and with Benzema leaving, no replacement for him. So yeah, I think Jude Bellingham is proving to be the franchise player at the moment from England, which, how long has it been since we've seen one of those? Surely there's someone between David Beckham and Jude Bellingham.
I think Jude Bellingham is the last Maverick type player that England have had, fun enough, since Beckham. I think if he hadn't had such a massive drop off, I think a lot of people would have said Raheem Sterling if Sterling didn't have that drop off, because he's generally been one of England's best players. But no, I think. Could you say Rooney? Maybe not.
Probably Wayne Rooney. I mean, no one's seven Pete's the FIFA covers like that.
But genuine, I would say when you look at it, I would say the last Maverick or that type of player who's come from here that wasn't English, it's probably Gareth Bale.
Yeah. I was going to say we've got to mention Bale, because and obviously even in Nathan's absence, because I know that if he was here, he'd be screaming about Gareth Bale. So yeah,
I would have muted him just because it would have been funny to see him shouting Bale, 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 and it was like, what? Love you, Nathan, if you're still about. Reece, do you want to briefly touch on Liga Portugal?
You cut there a bit. Can you say that bit again for me?
Do you want to quickly touch upon Liga Portugal for the sake of Maze?
Yeah, for the sake of Maze that our boys drew. Yeah, I don't think Sport were particularly great compared to Benfica. Obviously, winning 4-0 at the weekend. But when I'm looking at it, exciting league. I really enjoy Liga Portugal. The good thing about the league as well is how it's transitioned really well at the top. I mean, the top four at the minute, it's Boa Vista, Porto, Sporting, Benfica. But it's only separated by a point. But the fact that so early on, neither of your traditional big three are top of the league, and Braga are literally just inside the top 10. Now, I'm impressed with that. I like the recruitment that's been made by Benfica especially. I think Porto still have a bit to play. I haven't seen a lot of Sporting's recruitment, although I know Maze is a fucking sporting wizard. I like their team. I like their manager. I really hope they do well this year in Europe. But in circumstance, Portugal this year is going to be cooking. And I say this as well. I'm looking forward to the Portuguese teams in the Champions League again because they're going to do really well again in Europe. They've been doing really well consistently in the Champions League the past couple of years. I think you can definitely get something out of that. Porto, one thing that has been evident from the start of the season, though, is Diego Costa has started the league rather well. He was the talk of the summer for is he going to go? I think either this year this season or next season, I think will be his last in Portugal. Someone is definitely picking him up soon, especially after another top talents went to Chelsea and Diego Maria, which I think was a very bizarre choice to let him go straight away. There's some very good players in this league that are going to move on. Sporting have got a few of them. Pedro Gonçalves, Gonçalo Inácio, Diomande, fantastic centre-back. But then when you look at all-round base, Benfica are still... I think even though Benfica are not top of the league at the moment, I'm still expecting Benfica to win the league. I think Benfica are still the stronger team in the division at the moment. But I think Sporting Lisbon can generally fight away to another cup win because they are very good in the cup games. I'm looking forward to it. I really do like Portugal. I think Portugal goes under the radar a lot for football. It's a shame, really.
It does, yeah. I mean, I think personally the quality in there is actually sensational and it goes heavily under the radar. I think that
Gabriel Valeno's another one that I really like. Gabriel Veron and Valeno, sorry. Gabriel Veron and Valeno.
Yeah, exactly. I think what we're going to see, we could see a gutting of players in that league next summer. For all we know, Chelsea are probably going to buy half of those.
Taremi will end up going as well at some point.
Yeah. Now, gentlemen, you both remember the message I sent you all about a fun, exciting little addition tonight?
Yes.
As there are, to the viewers, as there are 3 United fans on, and Reese punished me with hosting for the... Well, I say punished me. It's not been too bad.
It was definitely still punishment, but you've done a good job.
Oh, thank you.
That's what happens for taking a 3-week break without authorising me. I didn't authorise your time off.
Okay. We'll talk about this backstage, yeah? Save it for backstage.
Yeah, you'll be fine. Don't worry.
To the viewers, I decided we'll play a little bit of a trivia game. Gentlemen, I hope you got your 11s ready. Tonight, we are going to discuss the Woo-Wah Show. Now, before any of you ask what the hell that is, let me explain. This evening, I asked these 2 gentlemen to come up with an 11 of the Woodward era at United. And I mean anything that signifies the Woodward era. The rules were you could pick anyone who signed for the club, who was linked with the club but didn't sign, any contracts that were done in that time, anything related to the Woodward.
I knew I was picking, so I've not. So I knew who I was picking, but I've not wrote it out. But I'm literally writing it out now. But it's genuinely funny. Is there a specific formation you want us to pick? Is there a formation you want us to pick, or are you going to decide it for us?
Whatever you want.
One?
Whatever you want. It's when we'll discuss. So what we're going to do is we're going to discuss who we've got in certain positions. Whether you've got 2 centre backs or 3 centre backs, we'll say this is my back 3 or my back 2 or whatever, and then from that we will decide who goes in. So the formation will decide later.
Casemiro is not allowed in this list.
No, he's not. So anyone who was signed before 2022?
Yes.
Yes, that's right. So from it. So you're looking from
2013 to 2022.
Yeah, so
that's for signings. In fact, that's for any activity whatsoever.
Yeah.
So that includes players we missed out on.
Players we were linked with and missed out on for whatever reason. Players we signed. And anything that happened in the club to do with
contract renewals and stuff like that.
Yeah. I like that George, of all people, mentions that.
I'm going to say this now. my formation could end up being either a 3-4-3, a 3-1-4-2, or a 4-5-1.
Mine's a 3-5-2. I'm putting it
Because
out
mine's-
there, but they're
midfield
wingers,
head-
not wing backs.
Midfield heavy is genuinely the problem with United, and that's where pretty much everything is getting picked from is midfield. So
Yeah.
you know what? Fuck it.
Um,
Since Pep Guardiola claims he invented the 3-2-4-1 when technically Xavi used it before him and the old WM was used before that, I'm going to go with the old WM formation. So I'm going to have a 3-2-4-1. Fuck it.
Do you know what? The only reason I didn't do that was because I was worried you were going to have a go at me about that.
Because
I
when you
thought,
look
don't
at
avoid it. Avoid this formation. That's what I was thinking because I know
There
Reece
wasn't
is
a
just going to
lot.
rip into me.
there wasn't a lot of fullbacks that we generally missed out on that we actually bothered to go for. So I'm not even going to bother including fullbacks. So I'm literally just going to pick 3 centre backs and hope for the best. Hello, Mel. Hope you're doing well. And I don't think, if there's one thing is for sure, I don't think any of you lads will disagree with any selection I've picked. I don't think any of them will be disagreed
Au
with.
contraire, I think the same thing as well. But listen, so what we're going to do is we're going to go by each position.
Yeah.
And we're going to give a brief statement as to why. Try and keep it brief. Saying that this is the Woodward show. I mean, listen, Woo-Wah himself was onto something when he said we can do things in the transfer window that other clubs can only dream of. I mean, he's right. No one, like, I don't think you could even fathom how much he messed up in that 9-year period he was involved. So I'll go first with goalkeeper. Now, the goalkeeper situation was actually a tough one for me because I did have someone in mind. I did put someone down originally, but this was a bit of a last-minute one. And I was going to put Keylor Navas down for that infamous fax machine story.
Yeah.
But I actually went with Dean Henderson because you could put David De Gea in there as well. Now, I see Reese's face, but Dean Henderson came back from his Sheffield United loan, the second one, and signed a contract on 120k a week that made him the 5th highest paid goalkeeper in the league. That contract wasn't necessary because he signed a new contract the year before. So he came back to United after that loan and got a significant pay rise off the back of a loan at Sheffield United, not on merit at United. And when you think about those kind of contracts, there are so many players that played for United in that Woodward era that got those kind of contracts. It's the reason David De Gea got put on 375k a week because he had a terrible 18 months before that contract.
Proof, a 3-2-4-1.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And I've even allocated who my captain would be.
Oh, wait, actually, before we go, shall we just agree that Jurgen Klopp is a manager solely for that Disneyland interview Woodward gave him?
No, my manager would have been Jose Mourinho in 2013, but Jurgen Klopp would be up there as well.
Yeah, George, you got anyone you want to bring in to the fold, manager-wise?
Well, arguably, you could say, because I still think, obviously because of what happened with Man City winning the title, and there was a potential that obviously we missed out on Pep because of it, because obviously Sir Alex then stayed an extra year, and there was obviously just that slight year obviously meant that Pep we missed out on. And we've seen now, obviously there's a big temptation. Obviously, I've often called him Fraudiola, but at the same time, obviously his football does consistently win trophies, and obviously his sort of ethos has always been, which is the same as mine. That's why I consistently raged on about De Gea for years on end. Is that possession is absolutely everything in football because it facilitates control, which is the most important aspect of the game. So, if I was going to have it, I'd be missing out on Pep. Would be my one.
Yeah, I mean, before I come to George, I'll come to you again for the goalkeeper in a moment. But obviously, Woodward with the fax machine and the Navas thing, you can see why I wanted to put Navas in, and you can kind of see from that, this will be interesting. So any story related to Woodward whether it be a ridiculous bid for someone or anything, just anything
there's only one
defines
Woodward comment. There is only one Woodward comment.
Anything that defines the Woodward shit show. That's all I will say. So, George, who did you put as a goalkeeper in this?
So I did. You kind of stole my thunder because I'd already put this down, obviously, before you spoke about it. But mine is De Gea. And principally because, again, the exact sort of reason that you went into in terms of like contracts and wages. Contract obviously in 2019, where we made him obviously the highest paid goalkeeper in the world. You sort of spoke him obviously £375,000 a week. And then, again, I'm sort of covering old ground here because we all know that obviously after the 2018 World Cup, De Gea fell off a cliff in terms of form. And for years was absolutely stealing a living. A lot of Man United fans sort of over the years have bigged him up, which is understandable because obviously for a few years he was absolutely phenomenal. And we all remember obviously the fact that, as you sort of spoke about, the fax machine, De Gea obviously for sort of the mid 2010s was the best goalkeeper in the world. Just an incredible shot stopper, was winning points left, right, and centre. But if we think about it, and again, obviously there's a theme with a few of my other team players as well in my 11, is that I hate it when we've obviously signed players or obviously re-signed players on contracts which are exorbitant and which then are sort of like a albatross around our necks for the next few years. And that was very much the case with David De Gea, because like I said, obviously that contract in 2019 and then for 4 years he was absolutely shocking for us. We were playing dinosaur football as a result with him. I mean, just obviously to bring it back to the very first thing I sort of said in defence of Onana when we spoke about the game, the fact that Onana obviously against Arsenal, who are a good side, made 42 passes and the most that De Gea made in his entire Premier League career was 39. That just about sums things up really in terms of we were, catering for someone who had been a great for the club in De Gea and had done very well, but ultimately was holding us back for all of those years. And for me, every time it just, to be honest, and obviously Reece will know this anyway, because obviously I've been on this podcast for many years, is that I've been speaking about De Gea and money and wages and how crap he is for years. So it just feels good to be able to say that once again about him. So yeah, that's definitely my goalkeeper.
Reece, are you the same?
Yeah, same goalkeeper. Nothing else to say really.
So I think based on that, I think we can all agree that De Gea goes in goal. I mean, I put Dean Henderson in based on the fact that he'd shown nothing at United before he got that contract.
Yeah.
De Gea, you could argue maybe at the time, even though he had a terrible time, he kind of got the merit just a year and a half too late.
Yes.
But I think we can all agree that, De Gea goes into that. Moving on to the defence.
It was just when you saw, just very quickly, it was just when you saw player obviously like Alisson and Edison, for example, and obviously the way they transformed their teams over that period, the wages they were on were like less than half of De Gea. It just really did stick in my craw. So yeah.
Oh, that's fair enough. I'm in complete agreement with you. Listen, I've been one of David De Gea's biggest fans for years, but even I knew that it was time for him to move on when the time came. Reece, you went for a 3. I went for a 3.
I have two different lineups that includes a back 4 and a back 3. So, but only because it sums up stupidity in certain areas. I've actually got so.
So I went for a 3 personally. My defense consists of 2 players we were strongly linked with and 1 player we did sign. I went quite recent and quite high profile with this. So at left centre back, I've got Harry Maguire. Now, first 2 seasons, he seemed like a solid defender. He was a very solid defender in that, that almost that back foot counter-attacking style. And then it's just gone downhill for him since the Euros. And I think even then we all knew that £80 million was too much money for him, regardless of what the market was at the time with Van Dijk. And I think the bigger thing about it for me was the fact that Mourinho asked for him a year prior, with the same time, when he said, when he asked, can I have Alderweireld? And the prices quoted for those two were 68 and 50 million respectively. And then deadline day came, and United, obviously with Woodward, went on a bit of a shopping spree around Europe and went, can we have your centre-back? Can we have your centre-back? Can we have your centre-back? 10-2, get anyone will do, whatever. And I remember a big quote coming out from that summer. I didn't include this player in the 11 because he currently plays for the team. But apparently it was said that Woodward said to Jose, I won't pay 50 for Alderweireld, I won't pay 68 for Maguire, I won't pay 50 for Godin, 50 for Boateng, whatever. But if Champions League, three-peat, World Cup winner Rafa Varane becomes available now, 2018, I've got 100 million in the bank ready for him. And you saw how bad we were at the time defensively. So I think that story in itself shows the ambition almost of Woodward and even the Glazers by that. The other two centre-backs I've got are Van Dijk and Ramos. We actually bid for Ramos, albeit he used us you could say he used us for this contract thing, whatever, but we did bid for Sergio Ramos. Virgil van Dijk, summer 2017, we apparently wanted him. We ended up with Lindelof. There was talk Mourinho wanted two centre-halves, and then, all a mess. There's conflicting stories from January when Van Dijk went to Liverpool that Woodward called Mourinho and said, listen, Van Dijk's available, do you want him? Apparently it was either Woodward didn't want to pay that money, or Mourinho said he was fine with the centre-halves he wanted, with the centre-halves he had at the club, which was weird because 6 months later he was obviously crying in press conferences for a centre-back. So despite the strong links, we didn't get him, and you just see that the impact Van Dijk had on that Liverpool team, and you kind of just see what it could have been for us in that Mourinho team. So yeah, that's my back three: Maguire, Van Dijk, and Ramos. Reece, I'll come to you.
I'll go with my. I'll go with my back three that I've done. Although, to be fair, my back four, I'll say afterwards anyway. My back three is Boateng, Godin, and Ramos. Because that genuinely would have won Man United the league, funnily enough. Under Mourinho, if you actually think about his style of play, you've, at the time, in my opinion, the best ball-playing centre-back in the world in Jerome Boateng. World Cup winner, multiple champions.
That's the perfect blend, isn't it? That's almost the perfect blend. You've got Boateng who's good on the ball, Godin who's just a rock-solid leader, defender,
and Ramos will kill you. So, and that's exactly it. But also as well, you've got a blended style who's played under managers who have managed them before. Boateng was also used to the Premier League. Godin, just a rock-solid defender for Uruguay, and for Atletico at the time, multiple league winner everywhere they've been, multiple European Cup winner or European trophies. They've done that. Ideally, if Man United had sense, I would have signed all three of them that entire summer, because there's no way Man City are getting past that defence anyway, even with Aguero, Sané, Sterling in that team anyway. They're not getting past those three defenders regardless, because it's actually solid who can command a positional awareness. And also as well, considering how United played at the time where we didn't build from the back, at least you can build through Boateng. And you can actually leave Ramos and Godin on their own. So De Gea doesn't have to worry about coming out of his box. De Gea can stand there going, well, I've got these two cunts in front of me, I'm fine. Boateng can move into a sweeper position and we're comfortable. But yeah, that was generally my centre-backs there. I did consider Maguire for the carnage, but I wanted to go for the three centre-backs we actually truly missed out on that are, in fact, on that world-class level. And they were world-class. And the fact that we didn't get either one of them is a reflection that we had lost that aura of bringing in those types of players, because we easily could have got two of them, let alone three, if we'd actually tried. I generally think we could have done. So yeah, that's the three that I've went for. The back four I went for, funnily enough, I took Godin out, and I actually had Valencia and Ashley Young. And the reason I had Ashley and Antonio Valencia is they were a symbolism of Jose Mourinho's era of the defence, where the experience is always going to stay there. But we persisted with them for so long that it didn't matter who was going to replace them on either position. it was generally never going to work because they don't have the experience or the respect of the dressing room to do it. So back four wise, Valencia and Young were my two fullbacks, but as a back three, it's Boateng, Godin, and Ramos.
That's fair enough. George?
Yes, what I was going to say is I think we should keep it as a back four. Because I've obviously got a back four, and
I'm
also,
all right with that. I'm all right with that.
It also sort of works in nicely because obviously I also have Ashley Young as one of my fullbacks.
I'm all right with that.
And
George, can I stop you for a minute? I completely missed that. My internet cut out for a brief moment.
Oh, sorry. So I was going to say if we can keep it as a back four, and the reason is because obviously I've gone for a back four with my formation.
I'm good with that. Yeah.
Yeah, obviously, as I sort of said, I've also got, obviously, Reece had Young and Valencia, but I've also got Young in my team. The thing with Ashley Young is I've still got, post-traumatic stress from how crap he was in those final few years of his time here.
It's bad how bad he was. Yeah, in the 17-18 season, he was genuinely fucking brilliant. He was one of the best fullbacks in the league, which is scary.
He was solid, wasn't he?
And I think what sort of like solidified it for me was the fact that obviously Ashley Young had to, and this is the specific moment that really did for me. Obviously, Ashley Young had to turn down a contract that we were obviously offering him an extra 1 year, because and this was obviously off the back of some of the most horrendous performances you'll ever like to see in a Man United shirt. I would often regularly sort of refer to Ashley Young as an oxygen thief, because that's how bad he was. For us,
stealing the life out the team.
Yeah, he was absolutely terrible. So Ashley Young's got to be in there. My other fullback was Luke Shaw. Now
no
this might sound it's no surprise, but I think for me, we obviously signed a fullback who actually transpires if you sort of look back at his days obviously at Southampton is that he rarely ever completed 90 minutes. He's one of those players who's always struggled with his fitness. He obviously had that horrific leg break, but I think we've often seen with Luke Shaw, he's almost the epitome of the player who, and again, obviously it's come back to this sort of like burger and chips story that I told earlier, is that you've got a player who only ever seems to try really hard for new contracts, but otherwise is persistently injured, doesn't necessarily have a good record, but is sort of like a stalwart. And obviously he's been here for many, many years, and he's really sort of, in my opinion, one of the figureheads for the Malays that sort of sunk over the club.
He's the longest serving player now at the club.
Yeah. So that's, and ultimately it was for any of those sort of renewals, because I think realistically, when I was sort of thinking about it, I mean, I'm a massive fan of Aaron Wan-Bissaka, probably over and above almost anybody in terms of how much I rate him, just because obviously I think as a defensive fullback, obviously in one-on-one situations, as we've seen, he's just exceptional, and he's the best in the world. And that's the sort of like, you want a player who's like the best in the world at your club, and Luke Shaw's never really fulfilled that. He, as I said, he's barely ever played for us. There's been obviously a couple of seasons where Luke Shaw's been brilliant, but obviously, as Reece sort of said, now he's the longest serving player, and for most of those seasons he's been average to crap. And that's why, obviously, when Reece sort of talking about Valencia and Young and stuff, that's why they're getting, time at fullback, because obviously Luke Shaw's often been not fit, or often, they've come back. He's sort of come back carrying a bit of timber, so to speak, and that's meant that Jose Mourinho, for example, has not played him. Shaw was one of them. And then I'll save the one that has to be in there, and I'll take no arguments. I'll save that for the one after this one. But my centre-back partnership was Victor Lindelof. Again, slightly surprising, but I often say about with Victor Lindelof that we obviously won the Europa League and Carabao Cup with Jose Mourinho in the 2016-2017 season. We then signed Victor Lindelof and won absolutely nothing for the next for the next 6 years, or next 5 years, obviously, until then Rafael Varane came in and obviously Lisandro Martinez, and that centre-back partnership was steady enough for us obviously to win the Carabao Cup and finally end that barren run. Lindelof for me was a prime example of why we failed in those situations. We often remember as well with Jose Mourinho in the Sky Sports studio when we signed Harry Maguire in 2019, talking about Lindelof's lack of aerial ability, and then it cut to a clip of him in doing the training in the on the pitch, and of course he missed the incredibly easy header.
I remember that one. Yeah. Oh my god. It was away at West Ham, weren't it?
No, it was home versus Chelsea.
Oh, was it the home Chelsea
the
game?
4-0
Oh, wow.
game, yeah. It was the 4.
I think they did that
Maguire
again
was,
against West Ham.
Yeah. Maguire was obviously man of the match that match, and obviously in the 4-0. And if you remember, obviously Dan James scored in scored the last goal. But yeah, it was, and obviously the reason they got Mourinho, of course, was because, well, he's box office anyway. But of course, he'd managed Man United and Chelsea previously, so yeah, it was good. It was obviously a good thing for it. But yeah, Lindelof, like, and I've never rated him. Again, obviously, you saw again even at the weekend, lack of pace, horrific decision. If that's Maguire as well, by the way, that makes that horrific challenge, that is lucky not to be sent off because Martinez is covering, then everyone's all over him. But because it's obviously Lindelof, he's sort of Mr. Nice Guy. No one is, but you sort of mentioned it as well, about how obviously for the first couple of seasons, Maguire was actually good for us, and I actually agree with that as a summation. Whereas I think Lindelof has never actually been good for us. I think even, and again, this is my sort of final point on it, because again, I'm conscious of time and I want to get onto my final pick in a second. But in this will sort of sum out for me, is that under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, obviously we were top of the league in January, and that was because in December, Victor Lindelof got an injury. And that meant that he had to bring in Eric Bailly, and Eric Bailly played alongside Harry Maguire, and we won about 6 or 7 matches on the spin. They then went to Anfield because obviously Lindelof was back from injury, and we decided that we'd put him back in because, again, obviously, I still use this as an insult. I've used this as an insult back then as well. So before Anthony was Eric Ten Hag's Brazilian stepson, Lindelof was Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's Swedish stepson, because he always got picked no matter what. And even though Harry Maguire and Eric Bailly had formed this incredible partnership and we were actually winning games consistently, he brought back Lindelof, and the title challenge that could have been, we could have won a title potentially then, dissipated, because you have to have that mix. Obviously, Eric Bailly provided that sort of recovery pace and complemented Maguire. And then we went back to Maguire and Lindelof, who, with Fred and McTominay, obviously, as the centre midfielders, ultimately cost Ole Gunnar Solskjaer a job. And in a few years' time, maybe Ole Gunnar Solskjaer will wake up from his slumber, having a nightmare, and then finally realise that those 4 cost him his job. So that's why Victor Lindelof's on my list. And my final pick, which has to be in there, more sort of, again sort of bringing this back again to Woodward, is Phil Jones. And for me, this is obviously Phil Jones's contract under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. We saw him smiling away with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer as he signed it. He then went on to, obviously, for the entire duration of his contract, he then went on to play 13 games for us over what was it, 4 or 5 years, and finally gets, and it's not even on that. I don't even know what the minutes were for those games, but that includes like subs, any sort of type of appearances. 13.
I'm pretty sure between when he signed his contract and I'm pretty sure like January, February 2020, apart from the one or two appearances after that period, the 11 games was in that period. What I mean?
It was.
I think it says it all.
Yeah. So ultimately, for me, that he just has to be in there, because he's, again, that sort of termite locust or whatever that survives the nuclear fallout. I was sick to the back teeth of just sort of seeing him, and again, he's injured, and it wasn't even a case. Obviously, a lot of people sort of felt sorry for him, but he got offered on loan out to Bordeaux in his final season, obviously a couple of seasons ago, and he didn't want to go. So that just sort of sums up for me the mentality of Phil Jones. He was quite happy to steal a wage, and even if I sort of call Ashley Young, obviously I think he's probably going to make it into the team because both me and Reese have him. Even if I sort of call him an oxygen thief, there's sort of above him, there's sort of this biggest leech in the entire squad over that entire, and that is Phil Jones. How 13 games over that entire period. I think it worked out that it's over £1 million we've paid him for every single appearance that he's made for the club over that like 4 or 5 year period since that new contract under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. So he just has to be in there for me. Absolute parasite, and yeah.
I was on mute there. I didn't realise. I think we can all agree that Young and Valencia are going at fullbacks, because I don't think you can contest that. I think you make a good point regarding Shaw, actually. I think that is because I think time and time again we've seen players play for contracts, get them, and then fall off, coincidentally. Regarding centre-halves, what was that? 7 or 8 different centre-halves we listed there? Me and Reese both went with back threes. We both had Ramos in it, but
My back four's got Boateng and Ramos.
So I'm just trying to see, who do we fit in? I mean, I think we've got to have one that was a player we missed out on and a player that we did get or we did have, but was terrible for whatever reason.
I don't mind, but I know that I've won the midfield battle.
I think it should be Ramos and Jones, because I think you both had Ramos, didn't you? So he's
Yeah.
got to go in there, and I
Yeah.
think we've got to have. I just can't move. If there's one player I'm going to stick on for the which is incidentally more time than he spent on the pitch. In terms of it's him. It's just criminal, really.
In fairness to Phil Jones, he was a good player, and it just never kicked on, and then it just went downhill, and then he looked great when he made that appearance against Wolves, and I'm talking from a young player perspective.
He's
When
never
he first
been
came
good.
in, he looked decent,
He's
but he just
never
never
been
kicked
good.
on.
No, he's never been good. And United fans I knew at the time got gassed because he got compared to Duncan Edwards, which was a fucking disgrace.
Oh no,
anyway, so.
that didn't bother me in the slightest. I
And
didn't
people
fall for
think
that. I
he was
just thought,
there's people that still think he's a good holding midfielder because he had a good performance against Real Madrid. No, Madrid just chose not to go after him that night.
to be fair,
Madrid were like, we don't need to go near this sideshow Bob.
he'll mess up on his own.
Yeah, so
But
I think
so in the combined 11,
Valencia, Young, Ramos, and Jones. Yeah.
yeah, that's what it's looking like in the combined 11. Now, regarding the midfield, so
I've definitely won this. If we're doing
I'll
it
tell
as a
you what.
4-2-3-1, like your two partnerships plus the number 10, I think I've pretty much won this.
I'll go with my two partnerships and my number 10 first then. So in the partnership, this is coming from the same summer, and I think for the fact that these two players are in it tells a lot about what happened that summer. The partnership is Fabregas and Fellaini.
Yeah,
We spent all summer courting.
I've definitely beat you in this.
In what aspect? Footballing sense or Woodward shit show sense? Because I think I win.
Footballing sense, Woodward shit sense, and the fact is we had the manager that wanted all three of the players I've got.
Okay, interesting.
I've literally got you in the holy trinity that Woodward fucked over. I genuinely have you beat. Who's your number 10?
I'll get into that in a minute. To be honest, Reece, it wouldn't surprise me if you got the number 10 as an outlier. But listen, I've got Fabregas and Fellaini because I've said this 1,000 times. We spent all summer courting a certain kind of midfielder, which was clear that we needed that kind of midfielder because Paul Scholes retired, and then Fletcher was ill for half the time or was just coming back. And then you had Cleverley and Anderson who weren't great. And you spend all summer courting Fabregas. This new chief executive called Ed Woodward is on the scene. He's going, I'm going home from pre-season. I've got things to sort out. And I think that it tells the story when you miss out on Thiago, whether it be Woodward messing up or Moyes vetoing the move, to then we're courting Fabregas all summer, and then we're making last-ditch attempts to lowball Everton for Fellaini and Baines weeks after Fellaini's release clause has expired. So we end up paying more for him. And then in the final hours of the window, seeing if we could get Baines or Fabio Contrao on loan. I mean, the Fellaini signing itself, they sign him. And then in training, you've got David Moyes trying to teach him 1-2 touch, which is not what he can do. And Fellaini was there for the next two managers. It wasn't until the third manager came in after, who was only caretaker at that point. He just went, yeah, he's got to go. No. Whether it was Pochettino who would come in after Ollie, or Zidane, or Ollie taking the job, or anyone, none of them were going to play with Fellaini, let's be honest. So that's my partnership. At the 10, I got Thomas Muller because we actually bid £100 million for him, which I find hilarious how we got the money to do that. So Thomas Muller was my 10, and I think, listen, under Louis van Gaal, Thomas Muller, I remember him bursting onto the scene at the World Cup in 2010 like it was yesterday, and he's always been one of my favourite players since. I think it's a travesty I actually don't have one of his football shirts, to be honest. But he was my 10, and he's an excellent footballer. He was an excellent footballer, and Why? I don't understand why you picked the shirt where they didn't even make it out the groups, but we moved.
But I
So
got I got the shirt where he was still a world champion.
that's a good point. George, I'll come to you next because I want to save Reese's till last.
Yep. So for my sort of like, I've got a midfield three. Again, obviously, you can have like sort of partnership and a 10, however you want to sort of play it. I've consistently, obviously, in my team, I've consistently gone for players who've been absolutely shit for us, and because I just can't even on like when we sort of think about players that we might have got, it's kind of it's like sort of sort of pipe dream, so to speak, because you never quite know whether that player would ever have got, even if the bid had been like sufficient or whatever it had been, you never quite know what the actual talks were and whether the player would ever have gone for us. But
Yeah.
one of mine is Fred. This is pretty much because obviously we had, I think of all the managers we've had, I know obviously we're sort of big on Eric Ten Hag now, but I think the one sort of manager that we've had over the period since Sir Alex that did, was, at the time sort of thought of, and I think even since he's sort of proven himself as an exceptional manager as Jose Mourinho. We obviously have that summer before he goes, where we think we're going to bring in some incredible players, but ultimately Fred is one of those players that we bring on off the strength of some Ukrainian Farmers League compilation in which we see the same goal over and over again, scored by Fred. And yeah, that was just that just sort of summed up the one moment where we were thinking maybe we might have the spark or the opportunity to maybe achieve something of note, or was being built. Fred was just sort of symbolic for me. Signing him was symbolic of sort of slamming that brief light of hope down. And I think, again, of course, for the few seasons he's been here, I know he's a sort of fan favourite, but actually for me, he was mostly crap. I've spoken about it before that persisting with him, McTominay, Maguire and Lindelof was Ollie's downfall. Those four were like the unholy four, the unholy quartet of doom for Ollie. And Fred was... well, we've seen plenty of times, obviously, the memes and things when Ollie was like sort of cheering and like he was almost like a schoolboy, like, well done, Fred, for having a shot and all this other sort of crap. He was absolutely crap, and thank God he's gone. Really, I know obviously we have terrible midfield depth, but he was a player that we should never have signed. And ultimately, again, for the few years that he was with us, we failed. Obviously, again, so many different defeats with him playing. Obviously, you can't really sort of bring in McTominay in that regard, of course, because he's an academy prospect. Although I will bring in an academy prospect in one of my other midfield picks, but that's for differing reasons. But yeah, Fred, absolute crap for many years, and unbelievable that, as I said, during the summer of particular promise that he was a player that we brought in under Woodward's astute leadership in inverted commas. Another one is Donny van der Beek. I think we've, obviously he's still at the club, but he was obviously very well thought of, finished high up in the Ballon d'Or rankings before we got him. But ultimately, it was a player that we just decided to get because had a good relationship with Ajax. He was just an easy sort of pickings. When we got him, I was very much in the minority of saying that he wouldn't work. And of course, we're now sort of a few years down the line. He's probably been one of the worst signings that we've made in terms of lack of game time. Even when he has had chances, he's sort of been injured. He's been loaned out and, been pathetic in those loans as well, obviously with Everton. Again, you just sort of see him sort of running about aimlessly, doing nothing. I often have sort of praise or feel like players who are world class or who really do succeed, who are very good players, have these sort of like one quality that's sort of outstanding. And with Donny van der Beek, he doesn't have that sort of outstanding quality. He looked very good, obviously, with Ajax, as we know, but that was in a team that was very much a team where everything was like flowing together. Everything relied on like passing and movement, and everything was almost like telepathy. So maybe if he spent like about 5 years in some sort of concentration camp with every other Man United player, there might then be some sort of telepathy revealed. But as it stands, obviously, I've sort of, and I think a lot of other fans have taken it up as well with Donny van der Bench, as we've sort of like termed him, because he's been on the bench like stealing a living again. And was just a terrible signing, just didn't fit. Obviously, Bruno was already at the club, and as we saw, obviously, filling in these numbers, and Donny was going to try and play at the 10, but couldn't really play there. He's not got the physical attributes to play anywhere else, really. Obviously, in the base of the midfield, he's just not. He's not quick enough. He's not strong enough. I've often said that with him. He's got a weak mentality as well as a weak physicality. Too much of a nice guy every time that he gets interviewed. Oh, nicey, nice, no competitive edge. And again, an absolutely terrible signing. Shocking that we made it. And then my third midfielder is Andreas Pereira. And the main reason for this is because he was like a human boomerang that we consistently, kept at the club consistently. I don't know. I shudder to think how many times we actually loaned him out before we finally got rid of him. It felt it may well have been 4, but it felt like it was about 50. He was just this player that we didn't seem to have any idea what to do with. And again, it's a key part, I think, of Woodward's responsibilities, and obviously that's with all 3 of these midfielders, to make sure that we acquire the best possible talent that we can, and also to get rid of Deadwood. And ultimately, obviously, with Donny van der Beek and Fred, we were supposed to be acquiring good talent with either of them. We paid exorbitant fees for both of them, I should say, as well. Obviously, over 50 million for Fred, 40 million or whatever it was for Donny van der Beek, which we thought was a steal. But obviously, Jack Grealish was available, and we should have got him instead, as we've already seen with Man City. And obviously, the second part of that, like I said, getting rid of Deadwood, and with Andreas Pereira, he is perhaps the poster child. If we think about FFP and all those sort of, not getting rid of players and not getting, good fees for them, he's the poster child of that, sending him out consistently on loan, never actually selling him. And it just sparks again of terrible management of players. So I just had to have him in there. So that's my midfield 3.
One thing I will add, actually, on that Van der Beek point is I mentioned this on the show last week, Chris. You might remember, I think I said it in the group chat as well, that this summer for United was kind of like summer 2020 for United, where Ollie went to the board asking for Grealish, Sancho, Upamecano and Ake, and getting left with Van der Beek, Telles and Cavani. Yes. Telles, after missing out on Reguilon, Telles has left, and we finally got our man 3 years later, which I think, even though Woodward's gone, the ghost remains. Now, the gentleman below me has been sitting there, all high and mighty and smug, that he's got this sensational midfield 3 that he's been begging almost to bring in, saying, "Oh, I've beaten you all," and he might have, Go on, Devils Rising. What have you got?
I picked a midfielder that Mourinho wanted, a midfielder that Moyes wanted, and a midfielder that Van Gaal definitely wanted, and that's Fabinho, Kroos, and Thomas Müller. That is the holy trinity of failure.
So we both got Müller in the team. Does Müller automatically go in the 10 then?
Yes.
Müller was the one big mistake. Apart from another 2 that'll be mentioned. Actually, my front 3, to be fair, are a mistake that United made in different ways. But Fabinho would have solved 2 problems for United at the time. He would have either been our right back before Monaco decided he was a brilliant midfielder, so we're going to try him in midfield. So he could have been our defensive midfielder for Mourinho as well. We lost him at Liverpool because we didn't action it. Toni Kroos is the best playmaking midfielder I've ever seen from a deep position. Like, when it comes to passing acutely, he's got the best passing accuracy I've ever seen as well. He does not miss when it comes to short or long range passing. It's always precise, it's always accurate, and it doesn't matter how much older he gets, it's always crisp, perfect. And it's no surprise that he's won the Champions League, he's won the World Cup, he's won every major honour you can get because he's trusted and tried upon with his style of play. Brilliant playmaker, he's a hard worker as well, he's a leader. And another thing as well, though, is he has that dressing room respect that ours did not really have. Likewise, you talk about midfielders like Fabregas and Thiago as well, who we wanted for that deeper position. Toni Kroos out of the 3 is, in my opinion, the better player. and is the one that we really missed out on the most. Thomas Muller, right winger, striker, central, like second striker, basically centre forward, attacking midfielder, destroyed England in his World Cup debut. Like, won the World Cup, Confederations Cup. He's won 2 trebles. He's won 11 league titles in a row. Multiple times he's won doubles. He's won the German Player of the Year numerous times. He's back in the Germany squad because of the injury to Füllkrug. But he's that go-to guy reliably for every manager he's had because of his versatility, his intelligence, his finishing ability.
He is a goal scorer.
He's a brilliant player, and he's so underrated as well. From certain people I know that do not put him in that bracket, he's genuinely one of the best players I've ever seen. He's probably one of the most humble footballers as well. Always softly spoken in an interview. He always speaks well. He never tarnishes his players. He never speaks ill will of his football club. He never talks ill will of a manager. He says if things aren't working out, he says it behind closed doors because behind closed doors is where it should be done. He's a model professional, and he's generally up there for one of those. He's a player that Van Gaal desperately wanted, that we wanted from a creative aspect. That's something that we missed out on. So, yeah, that's my midfield, Fabinho, Kroos, Muller.
The thing is, at the time, I mean, 2 things I'll add before we pick our ultimate trio in that midfield. I mean, I think regarding the Muller situation, that was at a time when Van Persie left, Rooney was in decline and couldn't play as a striker. We signed Martial that summer. Mm-hmm. But I think if you put Thomas Muller up front, I don't think we would have, at least up front with Rooney in a way where they both change around in some way. I think we would have been really good for goals that season. Because Thomas
Muller up front, Van Gaal gets to play the football he wants.
Exactly. I think that's what we were missing from the Van Gaal era. It was almost like the players we were signing, a lot of them were like 5th choice players for what he actually wanted to do. No, I know Muller was first choice, but a lot of players
he was the only difference. He was the only first choice player.
I almost went with Kroos, and because I actually love Kroos as a footballer, but I thought having Fabregas and Fellaini together in my chosen midfield was like just proved that from that one summer alone that we should have seen. It was almost an omen of what was to come for the next 9 years.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think, what do we do? Because
I think we take one. I think we should take one of each from our midfield that sums up. You had the failure of United within the actual squad itself, the failure to act, and just Woodward being a prick. So, guarantee you'll probably pick Muller anyway.
Muller's going to be in there, I think, because I think we can all agree that £100 million at that time as well was insane. Because that was the bid.
Muller in the 10 role. I reckon George will probably go with either Fred or Pereira. I'm going with Toni Kroos.
I would have, in the 8, I probably would have gone with Toni Kroos as well. It's really just the partnership there, what we go with, because I think, I mean, for example, we could, if Moyes stayed, we could have had a Kroos and Fellaini partnership at one point.
We still would have had Juan Mata playing the 10 role, just remember that.
I think that, yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why Mata didn't get in my team.
I was tempted to include Juan Mata, but I've got nothing against the man.
Yeah,
I actually think he did quite well for us overall. Obviously his goal and assist return was actually quite good.
I think that's especially considering he's played out of position a lot of it.
He's replaced Iniesta now in Japan. He's taken Iniesta's role in Japan, so I wish him well.
Yeah.
Fabinho, Kroos and Muller, you get the 3rd choice, George.
I think Fred.
Can I tell a story about Fred?
No.
Quickly. Apparently,
it's 5 to 10. We have got a front three to do.
just quickly. Apparently, Woodward didn't even ask for the asking price. Assumed they'd ask for 50 because he heard City were involved. So he slapped 50 odd on the table, and they just accepted.
That kind of sums up one of my attacking choices. City were involved. So pick a position. I'm taking left wing. That should probably tell you what I'm going with.
Centre forward.
You get right winger then. Name your two players that you cannot mention. So I cannot include Gareth Bale and Lewandowski.
So because I went with a 3-2 front line almost, on the wings I had Bale and I won't say who I had. Well, I will mention who I had on the other wing because it just seems a bit weird putting him in there.
Well, you're in the right wing anyway, so you need to
No, I
name your
know.
other striker and your left winger.
I had Bale on the wing. I had two strikers,
Yeah.
Which were Haaland and Morata.
Okay, fair enough. And
I put Morata in there because I only put Morata in there because of one moment. It looked like we were going to sign him, and then somewhere changed.
And you dyed your hair, you muppet. Anyway, George, so you've got both wingers to name.
Yeah, so I'm actually unsure because mine aren't technically wingers. Because I actually think centre forward we've actually made a lot more. I mean, we know this anyway factually, and that's why Højlund's such a breath of fresh air signing him obviously at such a young age. Because we've signed more pensioners, just absolute wastrels. So yeah, I'm gonna have one of two picks on my centre forward pick, but my other player was, and it depends which ones you think. But my winger was Di Maria. Obviously for obvious reasons, no real need, and that was obviously going to be my right winger. But my left winger was obviously one of the centre forwards I'm going to name in a minute when I have my choice.
That's cool. So I'm just going to go on the bat on this one because I haven't started any of them yet. My left winger is, funnily enough, the winger that I actually hoped would have worked at Man United, because at the time, despite there was an evident little bit of decline in his performance, he was still one of the best wingers in the league and one of the top 5 wingers in my opinion at the time.
Sanchez,
especially Alexis Sanchez. Yeah, when he came to the league, breath of fresh air, brilliant for Arsenal. I mean, 80 goals and 141 appearances is impressive. I didn't want Mkhitaryan to leave. I wanted Sanchez to come in anyway because that would have been great. Mkhitaryan, Sanchez, you've got something there, but we lost out. Obviously, Mkhitaryan went. We didn't win the trade because Mkhitaryan was actually, despite not doing good at Arsenal, he was still better than what Sanchez was for us. Obviously, Sanchez 1 goal and 2 assists isn't particularly impressive. The decline was evident. Didn't help he was playing in a Mourinho team where it's bizarre that Sanchez didn't work in a Mourinho team considering that Hazard worked, because he was given the positional freedom on the left where he didn't have to defend a lot. He just has to stay forward and be a creative threat. And for some reason, all Sanchez's creativity, his pace, his explosiveness, his finishing all disappeared. Especially when it's big wages and he was given the number 7 shirt where you're thinking, this guy's going to work. United have got a genuine... At the time, maybe you could say Sanchez, was he world-class, was he not world-class? But when he was playing for Arsenal, you can definitively say he was Arsenal's world-class player, where he was carrying them. He could have been a striker for us. He could have played in the right-hand side as well because he played in those positions. Workhorse. I think the reason he flopped at United so badly as well is he played World Cup, Premier League season, no injuries. Copa America, no injuries. Premier League, no injuries. No time to recover.
That was lack of freshness.
Yeah, I think Arsene Wenger knew he had no other option because Arsenal were still at that point where they couldn't genuinely sign anyone, so they could only get like 1 a season where they couldn't replenish their squad. So Sanchez had no other option but to be that fulcrum every single time. I mean, he came to United, I was genuinely so excited that he came in, but the fact that it went straight downhill straight away robbed me of great moments, especially because Sanchez he was so good to watch, and I would still take him back right now, funnily enough, because he's recovered at Marseille, he's rejuvenated himself, but then Marseille get rid of him so they can bring in Aubameyang. Morons. Typical French. They always
Which is funny because that's what happened at Arsenal.
Yeah, they get rid of a good player and bring in shite. But no, Sanchez, all in all, quality player, but we got the wrong Sanchez, so it was obvious Sanchez was my left winger.
No worries. I'll quickly get my winger problem out of the way because I went with almost like a 3-5-2. The wingers I had were Bale and Hakimi. the reason I put Hakimi in there was because there's a story circa 2018, 2019. So he was in loan talks with Spurs at the time, had dinner with Pochettino. Then Woodward caught wind of this and got Matt Judge to meet Hakimi in their London office. When Matt Judge interviewed him, he was asking questions almost like, what's your name? Who do you play for? What are your international caps? What's your pedigree? Just questions like this. And considering Hakimi is a lifelong United fan, he was quite offended by it. So I think from that, he ended up at Dortmund on loan, and then obviously his career progressed as it did. But I think it was the summer we signed Deleuze. So that's the reason I went with him on the right wing. But for this, because we're going with a 4-2-3-1, I'm not going to actually pick him for my right wing. I'm actually going to cheat a little bit here and use who I used on the left wing, which was Gareth Bale.
Yeah.
Because of the story, obviously, on deadline day, Woodward tried to hijack that move. I think Spurs accepted 125 million. There was a helicopter ready to bring Bale, all that. What Mata had was what Bale was meant to have. They just recycled it. But obviously, Gareth Bale went to Real Madrid, and I think whether it was Ferguson who stayed, even if Moyes was obviously manager at the time, whether it's Mourinho that came straight after Sir Alex.
If Sir Alex had stayed that summer, we would have signed Ronaldo and Gareth Bale.
Exactly. So
and that confident we would have signed both.
I think there would have been a good chance, even if another manager was in place, whether it would be Ancelotti or Mourinho or Sir Alex.
I reckon
Bale could have happened, and
no, I'm not even kidding. I reckon we would have signed both that summer, which probably would have kept Mourinho at Madrid for another year. I think if Ronaldo had left, Mourinho may have stayed, because that's one less dominant figure that stops him, even though he was going anyway. But if we had got Ronaldo and Bale that year, I think we would have won the Champions League, funnily enough, the following season. We would have had, our midfield may not have been great, but I think we would have looked at the midfield situation anyway. Whether it being Cleverley and Anderson, I think we would have moved that around, but
we would have rotated,
we still would have played that 4-2-3-1, and our front four would have been Bale, Rooney, Ronaldo behind Van Persie with Chicharito. That would have been our front four with Chicharito, and funnily enough, Welbeck still would have been there. Kagawa for rotation. We actually would have actually been competent. But no, we decided we're going to waste time, and we're not going to. The annoying thing is, though, is we could have had a lot that summer. We could have had Lewandowski that summer as well, because there were talks about it, but then Dortmund said, no, we're not letting him go right now because he's key to our side. So there you go. That's what we could have. That's what we could have been. We could have had literally. I think Ronaldo would have been 150 at the time. Because Real Madrid would have just let it go. So you're looking at nearly 300 million.
I think he was approaching the last couple of years. Actually, I think he was approaching the last year or so of his contract at the time.
It still would have been about 150 because he just had that record season of numbers. Yeah. So what? 100 million plus Ronaldo from about 150ish maybe. That's 250 million. There's no way that Man United would not have went out and won pretty much everything the following year because the money would have
Thiago Alcantara for 20 odd million, because I think Ferguson wanted him. I think Ferguson agreed with the club.
It was Moyes that wanted him as well. It was never going to happen. I don't think we were ever going to get. The minute Pep Guardiola said it's Thiago or nothing, before he even went there, summed up. Thiago or nothing, even though he was hardly available anyway when Pep was there, but he was, funnily enough, when Pep left. But I think it would have just been the attack. I think we would have just used academy players in the midfield. But the funny thing is, even with academy players at the time, you have those players around you like Rooney, Van Persie, Chicharito. We would have been fine. And I think we still could have won something because we would have just played so high that because we had the quality there anyway, it'd be very hard to beat United at the time.
Yeah. So who's playing at striker?
Yeah, so you guys can pick obviously of the two people. Like I said, I was pigeonholing them into my formation.
If you
So
put
I re-
Lukaku in this
I-
team, I swear to God.
I reckon one of the two picks George has picked is Odion Gallo.
Yeah, Falcao's got to be in there, surely.
one of you's right, and it's Reese.
Falcao does not get slated on this for the Woodward era. That was not even his fault. I'm not even going to put any conversation with Falcao. That was a mistake. We got him a year later when he was fucking crickled after he got injured. It's definitely
Yeah.
a Gallo. I knew it was a Gallo.
For a couple of years, obviously Falcao was just like the best striker in Europe. It was incredible, obviously that early 2010s. But yeah, one of them obviously is Odion Igalo. I think that just sort of, again, was almost the prime moment where everything was just, we've seen this time and time again with Man United, and obviously Woodward was a major part of it. These sort of last minute deals, panic buying, panic getting people in, and I think obviously if you're going to Shanghai Shenhua, to go and get Odion Igalo, I think that is probably, in many ways, I'm always sort of talking myself out of the second pick I'm about to make, because the more I'm saying Odion Igalo from Shanghai Shenhua, I'm just thinking that just sort of sums it up when you're going to that those sort of great lengths, not just geographically, but also in terms of like quality of league. We obviously that winter we were sort of crying out for a striker, and we were linked to so many different players, and then you sort of hear this last minute news about Odion Igalo, and you think it can't quite be true. Of course it was.
Don't forget. We started the morning going after Josh King for 25 million, 6 months before he got relegated.
Yeah.
Then
Don't
we thought
even bring that up, because that was.
Then
that
we
was
were going in
horrible.
for Salomon Rondon, and then we finished the night with the goal.
I think that entire day was which name would make Man United fans shoot themselves quickest. Because that's what it felt like. That felt like a race to shoot yourselves.
So really, I think he's going to win in a way. But my second pick was going to be Edinson Cavani, and more specifically, obviously, for the second season, because, obviously, Reece got incredibly irate as I did. Obviously, we were doing the football podcast back then as well when Edinson Cavani was doing his sort of like twat laps around Manchester anywhere apart from on the pitch. He was sort of like socializing. There'd be constant sort of Instagram posts.
Pissed me off because of how good Cavani was.
Yeah, but what you sort of see on the on social media a lot of the time is you see a lot of fans who are like really supportive. And obviously there are some that are really critical, but when a player's like quite good like Cavani is, you see a lot of them saying like, great, it'd be great to see you back and stuff like that, or you're a great player, that sort of stuff in the comments.
Yep.
But because Cavani was off so much in that second season, like every single comment was like, "Why are you not playing? Why are you not earning you?" It was just it just begged belief, and yeah, obviously again it was a slightly emotional pick for me having Cavani in there, because that second season he really did steal a wage. There were so many times where we could have used him and he was injured, and obviously he'd somehow, as we know, make himself miraculously available for the national team before going off again, obviously, and then and then pretending to be injured, and then again like seeing him on Instagram, like on these various social outings. So it was just an absolute travesty to sort of get him in, and a real waste, really. But
I think one other thing as well that we do know is he was genuinely so ready to go as well for that second season.
Yes.
And he was going to lead the line. And I think it's quite a coincidence that he became so much of an absentee the minute, following up, Ronaldo came back, where you generally had two amazing strikers of their generation, literally amazing at the club. And you're thinking, United don't necessarily have to play with a 4-3-3 and rotate. They could generally just play a front two here, Ronaldo and Cavani, and just play the ball in. But then I felt like Cavani's like, no, I've been here, I've done really well. If that's what's going to happen here, then what's the fucking point? And in a way, I felt sorry for Cavani in a way, because he generally had a very good first season where people wrote him off too quickly. And he basically went, well, fuck the lot, I'm going to prove you wrong. Then does Zlatan Ibrahimovic. And it's like quite a coincidence that we got in that the time where, yes, he was old, but when he was watching as well, playing those games, Cavani consistently was one of our better players in his first season as well.
Yes.
Consistently better because he was actually leading from the front. The amount of pressing he done per game, nobody was on a touching level of him. Completely changed when Ronaldo came in. Obviously, it's not all down to Ronaldo, like Cavani's performances and his injuries kept coming up, but you would surely think that what we have there and then, as a United fan, you're thinking there's games where Ronaldo may not score, but Cavani's going to score, but then Cavani's not available, and you're like, we really do need you.
Yes.
And that did kind of suck and it hurt in a way because it was a while. It had been quite some time since at that point where United generally had two elite strikers that were actually developing. That was the worst part.
Yeah. I mean, who are we putting in there? I think Igalo
I'm going to
probably
go for
goes in
Igalo.
there.
I'm just going to go for Igalo because, like I said, obviously, just that was just like if ever, you think about sort of like the lack of authority and decision making, and just the sort of emergency buy / loan that is the sort of hallmark of Woodward, and obviously it still is now, obviously with Man United's current recruitment team, as we know, but I think Igalo was really that sort of like the peak, the zenith of that. So I think I'm going to put him at centre forward.
I agree with Igalo for a different reason. The reason I agree with Igalo is the amount of fans that got so gassed after that Europa League game where we were genuinely playing with kids, and he was like the only and he was the only senior, and he was the only senior citizen on the field, and he scored. And people got so gassed, and like he's going to cheer up trees, he's going to help United, and I'm thinking, going, he's on loan, and he's going to get outshone by a gimp who's now playing for Getafe.
It's the fact that he started 5 games and scored in all 5 of those games, and we all thought, because we hadn't seen something like that for a while. So it was almost like, it almost for a moment looked like we let Lukaku go the summer before and we'd upgraded somewhere. So I think that brings a lovely end to this Ultimate 11 where De Gea's in goal.
Yep.
We have a back four of Valencia, Jones, Ramos, and Young.
Yep.
A midfield partnership of Fred and Cruz. Then we have a 3 behind the striker of Sanchez, Muller, and Bale. Sanchez left, Bale right.
Yeah.
Muller in the 10. And Odi Nigalo up front, which
it sums
really
up
tells the story.
during the Woodward era.
It does sum up the Woodward era. And that brings an end to the show. It's been, gentlemen, a great evening, a great show this evening.
Mm-hmm.
Pleasure having you on. For all of you in the comments, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. And we hope to see you again soon. Have a good night.
Night, folks. Thanks for being a great audience.
Night.